Chapter 230. Inside, a man could be heard cursing in fluent American English. Although Jinwan didn't hear them clearly, she heard a word or two. With her English level, she could certainly understand them. She immediately leaned against the entrance of the alley and carefully looked in. She immediately saw Feng Ling standing against the wall. In front of her were two foreign men, tall and strong. The two men seemed to have surrounded her. One of them was holding a knife about the size of a watermelon, and the other was holding a long black electric baton. The two of them completely blocked Feng Ling. Seeing this, Jinwan immediately withdrew her head, leaned against the entrance of the alley, and held her breath so as not to alarm the two men inside. When she saw Feng Ling being blocked by the two men, although she seemed to be standing steadily against the wall, her clothes were untidy, her short hair was slightly messy, and there were some bloodstains on her face. She didn't know where she was cut or what happened. In short, she must have been injured. Feng Ling didn't seem to have any weapons in her hands. No matter how good she was at fighting, she couldn't gain the upper hand. No matter how she was blocked by the two foreign men, Feng Ling probably hadn't contacted her since yesterday. Something big must have happened. The two men continued to curse inside. After a few words, suddenly there was the sound of fighting. Jinwan listened for a while. Whether it was a hand-to-hand fight or a weapon, Jinwan's heart was in her throat when she heard the sound inside. She suddenly looked up at a car parked across the alley. She didn't know if it was the accomplice of the two foreign men. The background of Feng Ling and the American 11 base was quite complicated. If Jinwan called the police now, it might cause trouble for Feng Ling. She held her cell phone, paused on the call, and suddenly looked at a baseball equipment store on the first floor of the building. Her eyes lit up, and she walked over. Feng Ling was confronting the two men. The battle had not stopped. Since yesterday, she had been avoiding the two men from the American Mafia, but in the end, she was still trapped here. Both of her arms were injured in the fight just now. Although it was not serious, there was still blood dripping down her arms. When one of the men scolded her again, her eyes sharpened, and with a roundhouse kick, she kicked the man with the knife to the ground. Before he stood up, he was about to fight the other man with the stun baton, but the stun baton in his hand was a very strong weapon. If she was electrocuted, half of her body would be numb for 2 days. In the confrontation, the man who had just been kicked down raised a knife and slashed at her head. Feng Ling nimbly raised her hand and grabbed his wrist. With a sharp twist, she heard the sound of his wrist dislocating. The foreign man, who was much taller than her, immediately cried out in pain. Feng Ling expressionlessly raised her foot and kicked him. However, at this moment, the other man directly stabbed her waist with the electric baton, and half of Feng Ling's body was instantly numb. Although she suddenly turned around to avoid it and was about to fight back, her movements were still a little slower because of the electric shock. The man took the opportunity to kick her in the stomach. Feng Ling bent over to avoid it, but the man suddenly pulled up the slightly longer short hair on her head. F***ck. All kinds of curses rang in her ears, and Feng Ling's scalp ached from the pulling. No matter how much strength she had used up a lot of her strength. She was trying to find a way to retreat from this man's hand when she suddenly noticed a figure appearing at the entrance of the alley from the corner of her eye. Feng Ling suddenly smiled at the two foreign men. The corner of her mouth was stained with blood. In the dim alley, her smile was a little cold and ruthless. When Feng Ling successfully attracted all the attention and suspicion of the two men, suddenly, with two bangs, the two men were hit on the back of their heads. Before they had time to turn their heads to look, they were hit by the baseball bat and fell to the ground. Dizzy and unable to stand firm, Feng Ling took the opportunity to stand up, subdued the two of them, and pressed them to the ground. "Thank you." When pressing the two men down, Feng Ling ignored the blood on her body and turned her head to look at Jinwan, who was holding a baseball bat in her hand. Jinwan held the baseball bat tightly and quickly stepped forward, looking at the blood on Feng Ling's face and body with concern. She saw that Feng Ling had only been hit on the cheek. The other party had hit her so hard that her cheek was swollen and the corner of her mouth was stained with blood. She reached out to take Feng Ling's arm. "How are you? Are your injuries serious?" "I'm fine. It's just a minor injury." Feng Ling didn't push Jin Wan's hand away, but used her other hand to hit the back of the two men's necks. After being hit hard by the baseball bat and hit on the most vulnerable part of the neck, the two foreign men fainted and lay on the ground motionless. With Jin Wan's support, Feng Ling stood up. Seeing that Feng Ling didn't seem to be seriously injured, Jin Wan's tense heart finally relaxed a little. What's wrong with these two people? Do you have enemies in the United States? Enemies? Feng Ling glanced at the two men on the ground. Sort of. When I was still in 11 base, I did a lot of missions and made a lot of enemies. You're seriously injured. Let's get out of here first. Jin Wan pulled her hand hard again, wanting to take the injured Feng Ling away from this place. However, as soon as she exerted force, although Feng Ling didn't make a sound, she obviously frowned in pain. Jin Wan abruptly let go of her hand, saw the blood on her palm, and then looked at Feng Ling's black shirt, which couldn't see the color of the blood. Is the injury on your arm very serious? Jin Wan threw the baseball bat in her hand out and held her with both hands. Let's go to the hospital to stop the bleeding first. Before Feng Ling could say that she was fine, she had been forcibly taken out of the alley by Jin Wan. However, just as the two of them ran out of the alley, in the car parked in front of them, an accomplice who was also tall and strong suddenly opened the door and got out of the car. He held the same black electric baton in his hand and rushed toward them with a fierce look, cursing violently. Watch out! At the moment when the man swung the electric baton, Jin Wan and Feng Ling shouted almost at the same time. Jin Wan was about to pull the injured Feng Ling back, but Feng Ling instinctively pulled Jin Wan behind her, but the pain in her arm couldn't be ignored. The pain from the electric shock was still there. She wanted to push the man back, but her movements were still slower than usual for 2 or 3 seconds. In these 2 or 3 seconds, the man seized the opportunity and was about to reach out his other hand to restrain her. Chapter 231. They definitely couldn't go into the alley. Jin Wan pulled her to run to the other side, but the other party didn't intend to waste any time. Instead of chasing after them, he suddenly returned to the car and drove after them. Whether it was to chase after them or to bump into them, they didn't know. Mrs. Amo, you go first. Feng Ling suddenly paused. She had not planned to implicate Jin Wan. Why would I leave? I'm not a brother from your training base, so I don't know what sacrifice is or what morality is. But in my eyes, you're already a good friend. How can I leave? As Jin Wan ran, she tugged hard at Feng Ling, preventing her from waving her hand away. Let's run first. There's an alley ahead. His car can't drive into it. We'll think of a way after we get in. Seeing Jin Wan's insistence, Feng Ling ran a few steps and felt that her numb body really needed at least a day or 2 to recover from the electric shock. She couldn't run as fast as usual. Just as the two of them were about to run to the other alley Jin Wan mentioned, suddenly a black Jeep galloped from the road in front of them at a fast speed, and the moment it came to a stop in front of them with a screech. Feng Ling and Jin Wan looked up only to see that the back door of the Jeep in front of them was open from the inside out. Nan Hung, who was in the driver's seat, didn't explain at all. He just glanced at the blood on Feng Ling's face and said coldly, "Get in the car." Feng Ling's expression froze, and Jin Wan quickly helped her into the car. When Feng Ling sat in the car and saw that Jin Wan hadn't come up, she rushed to pull her. "Mrs. Mo, come." Jin Wan also got in the car, and the door closed with a bang. This sound isolated the sound of the engine of the car outside, and the tense atmosphere in the air finally relaxed a little. Before she could ask what was going on, Jin Wan sat by Feng Ling's side and tugged at her sleeve. "You're bleeding a lot. Do you want to go to the hospital to stop the bleeding, or go somewhere else?" "She can't go to the hospital." Without waiting for Feng Ling to speak, Nan Hung, who was driving, said coldly, "Take her to my place. I have hemostatic medicine and gauze." Jin Wan, help her bandage. "Do you have a place to stay in T-City?" Jin Wan turned to look at Nan Hung. "Is it far? My apartment is close to here. Just ask her to go to my place. Forget about you. You can't go with me now, lest you get into trouble." Nan Hung coldly spat out these words and glanced at Jin Wan through the rearview mirror. "Why were you there just now? If something like this happens again, remember to run first. Okay? Otherwise, if something happens to you, I'm afraid your man will chase me to the Pacific Ocean. I won't be able to live in peace for the rest of my life. Jinwan didn't explain to him, but continued to look at Feng Ling with concern. Seeing that Feng Ling's expression didn't change, she didn't seem to be surprised by the fact that they were chased earlier. She just didn't say anything. Jinwan gently stroked her body. Are you hurt anywhere else? Don't just stay silent. Tell me where it hurts. If it's too serious, just going home to bandage it won't do. You still have to go to the hospital for an injection. Feng Ling shook her head at Jinwan, indicating that she was fine and there was no need to worry. Jinwan suddenly noticed that there were several cars driving in the opposite direction of them. The cars immediately surrounded the car driven by the foreign man. Right now, she had no time to pay attention to the situation outside the car. Jinwan took out a wet towel from her bag to wipe the blood off Feng Ling's face. Seeing that Feng Ling's face was very pale, she immediately frowned. Someone actually dares to commit murder in broad daylight in our country. Is there any harm in this? Can we call the police? The domestic police can't handle this matter, Feng Ling said simply and raised her eyes to look at the man driving in front. Nanhang's driving skills were not inferior to Mo Jingshan's. It was clear that he was used to driving this type of jeep. Under his control, the large body of the jeep drove out of the area at a fast speed and successfully took the two of them away before the police arrived. Nanheng really did have a place to stay in T-City. It was a room on the top floor of a hotel that he had reserved for himself. No one was allowed to enter the entire floor. After entering the room, Jinwan helped Feng Ling to sit on the sofa and urged Nanheng to get the first aid kit. She then pressed Feng Ling's shoulder, saying, Feng Ling, I'll help you take off your clothes. Otherwise, when the blood coagulates, it will be very painful to take them off. Seeing that Jinwan seemed to be really worried about her, Feng Ling's originally calm and flat expression wavered slightly. Since she was a child, Feng Ling had never experienced pure friendship with someone of the same gender. In the past, she had always lived like a man in the base. No matter what kind of injuries she suffered, she would hide in a place where no one could see and bandage her own wounds. You can't lift your hand now, can you? I'll help you take it off. Don't move. Jinwan spoke and went to help her take off her clothes. Feng Ling did not refuse. When her top was taken off, thankfully, there was still a conservative black sportswear underneath. Jinwan's attention was completely attracted by the knife wounds on Feng Ling's shoulder and arm. With a pained expression, she turned to the bathroom to wash a towel and help her wipe the blood around the wounds. Nanheng came out with the first aid kit and saw such a scene. His gaze paused on Feng Ling, who was only wearing sports underwear. Before he could speak, Jinwan had already rushed over and snatched the first aid kit from his hand. She then turned back to disinfect and stop the bleeding for Feng Ling. The room was very quiet. With Jinwan bandaging Feng Ling's wounds, it was not convenient for Nanheng to stand by the side and watch. He coughed and went out. Half an hour later, the wounds on Feng Ling's body were almost all treated. Jinwan had just picked up the gauze to bandage her wounds. She then went into the room, opened the cabinet, and took out a loose black t-shirt that should have been worn by Nanheng. She helped Feng Ling put it on. Not long after, Nanheng entered the room. Seeing that Jinwan had already crouched down to treat the wounds on Feng Ling's legs, he raised his brows and chuckled softly. You're quite thoughtful in treating the wounds. As expected, Miss Ji is much more useful than before. Jinwan silently rolled her eyes at the disinfectant in her hand. She thought that Nanheng was resentful towards her because he wanted to personally bandage Feng Ling's wounds, but was unable to do so. She could not be bothered with him. At this moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Jinwan was startled and immediately raised her head to look in the direction of the door. She asked in surprise, Who is it? Is there anyone else here who knows? Could it be those people who chased after Feng Ling earlier? Nanheng glanced at her. Don't think too much. I just went out to talk to Mo Jingshan on the phone. He happens to be nearby. Who do you think will come now? Hearing this, Jinwan abruptly turned to stare at the door behind Nanheng. Chapter 232. Since Mo Jingshan was outside, wasn't it the same no matter who opened the door? It was impossible to shut him out. The doorbell rang again. It was a pleasant chime, not very loud, not harsh. But in Jin Wan's ears, this voice was like a tsunami suddenly sweeping across a calm sea, making it impossible for her to ignore it. Nan Heng was clearly teasing her. He did not open the door, but stood there, looking at Jin Wan with a faint smile. Jin Wan's hand was still holding onto the bottle of medicine. She placed it on the wound on Feng Ling's calf and did not immediately get up. Feng Ling glanced at them and suddenly put down her legs. She said, "Why don't I drive it?" Nan Heng immediately glanced at Feng Ling coldly. "Don't be nosy." Feng Ling's expression faltered. It had been a long time since she heard Nan Heng speak in such a cold and stern tone. She paused and chose to sit on the sofa without moving. At the same time, she turned to look at Jin Wan. "Mr. Imo must have come to see you. Go open the door. My leg injury is not serious. I can do it myself." The doorbell did not ring again, but she felt that Imo Jingshun would not leave so soon. She put down the disinfectant in her hand, wiped her hands, and got up to go to the door. The moment she opened the door, Jin Wan's hand gripped the doorknob tightly. The man standing outside the door was tall and slender. He was still wearing that low-key, clean white shirt, which made his originally calm and reserved temperament appear even gentler and more meaningful. Jin Wan raised her eyes and looked at the man outside the door. Mo Jingshun's eyes fell on her face the moment the door opened. They hadn't seen each other for a whole month, and she hadn't been very clear-headed before. This could be considered a true reunion. After opening the door, Jin Wan only met his gaze. Before she could see the emotions in the man's eyes, she let go of the door handle, turned to walk in, and said, "I'll deal with the wound on Feng Ling's leg first." She didn't know if these words were meant for Mo Jingshun, Nan Heng, or Feng Ling. In any case, Jin Wan didn't look at the man outside the door and went to Feng Ling's side. Feng Ling, who had suddenly become Jin Wan's biggest excuse, was thinking, indeed, she was like a little woman who had just learned how to fall in love. Thinking of Jin Wan's usual calm and composed demeanor, and comparing it with her current state, he somehow found it a little cute. Nan Heng immediately smiled at Mo Jingshun, who had been thrown out the door with a sympathetic gaze. Mo Jingshun, on the other hand, calmly entered, ignoring Nan Heng's mocking expression. Seeing the blood-stained towel by the sofa and the wound on Feng Ling's leg, he could guess what kind of danger they had just experienced. "What's going on? You were intercepted so quickly?" Mo Jingshun looked at Feng Ling. "Why is Jin Wan with you? Why would Jin Wan be with her?" Of course, he was only referring to today. Feng Ling didn't have time to ask why Jin Wan had gone there. She lowered her eyes to look at Jin Wan, who was squatting by the sofa to disinfect her wound. "I haven't heard from you since yesterday. This has never happened before, so I suspected that something might have happened to you. I planned to go to the neighborhood you lived in for 2 days to take a look, but I ran into this scene." Jin Wan treated the wound on her leg seriously and did not raise her head as she spoke. She didn't expect that Jin Wan would actually worry about her. Clearly, she was Jin Wan's bodyguard. Feng Ling felt slightly ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mo. I'll try to avoid this kind of thing in the future. If I accidentally hurt you, it would be my negligence. Today's matter, I'm really being followed and surrounded by enemies, isn't something you can control. Why are you apologizing to me?" Jin Wan still lowered her head, as though using this opportunity to talk to Feng Ling, she could successfully ignore the gaze of the man who was watching her from behind. Feng Ling suddenly raised her head. "Speaking of which, if Mrs. Mo hadn't helped me today, I wouldn't have been able to escape so smoothly." Nan Heng raised his brows and glanced at them. "Is that so? Then as a bodyguard, aren't you going to lose your job soon? Do you want to return to America with me, to the base?" Feng Ling, no. Nan Heng. Jin Wan raised her eyes to look at Feng Ling, seeing that she rejected her so straightforwardly. She immediately smiled. "That's right. I'm not going back. Feng Ling is fine by my side. Why would I return to the base in America? What's so good about being with a bunch of men and suffering? Besides, even if I don't completely need a bodyguard by my side, I still need a good sister. Don't you think so, Feng Ling?" These few days, Feng Ling had been touched by Jin Wan's words time and time again. She looked at Jin Wan and slightly raised the corners of her lips. Nanhung suddenly narrowed his eyes. He felt that after spending so much time with Jin Wan, Feng Ling had actually gained a hint of femininity and gentleness that he had never seen before. Does it hurt? Jin Wan saw that there was a red and swollen area around Feng Ling's ankle. She wasn't sure if she had bumped into it somewhere, so she used her hand to touch it. No, Feng Ling answered with a smile. Seeing the two of them acting out their deep sisterly affection, the two men who were completely ignored exchanged a silent glance. After helping Feng Ling with her wounds, Jin Wan stood up. She tidied up the medicine box and asked, Nanhung, do you have water here? Earlier, when she pulled Feng Ling along to run, Jin Wan didn't know if it was because of her heart or because she was really thirsty. Either way, her mouth was dry. Drinkable water? In the fridge, there's mineral water prepared by the hotel every day. Go look for yourself. Although this was a hotel room, it was a family-style suite. There was a kitchen, a study, and a kitchen. The fridge would also have drinks delivered by the staff on time. Jin Wan put down the things in her hands and turned to enter the kitchen. She opened the fridge door and took out a bottle of water. She was about to twist it open when she realized that the cap was too tight. This was a bottle of mineral water that had not been opened. It was likely that the cap was not handled well when it left the factory. It was much tighter than other mineral water. She used a bit of force but was still unable to twist it open. She was about to place this bottle back into the fridge and change to another one. She had just opened the fridge door when the bottle in her hand was suddenly taken away. She only saw an arm reach out from behind her, and the water was already in that person's hand. Without needing to turn back, she only needed to see the arm in the white shirt to know that the man standing behind her was Mo Jingshan. Jin Wan was silent for a moment in front of the fridge door. She turned to look at the man who had easily opened the bottle cap for her. The already open bottle of mineral water was handed to her. Mo Jingshan's voice was the same as always. Drink it. Jin Wan's hand paused for a moment before she raised it. When she received the water, her mind was still in a daze. For some reason, she said, "Thank you." Chapter 233. Thank you. Mo Jingshan's voice was low and indifferent. He glanced at her. Who are you talking to? To you, of course. Jin Wan held the water bottle without speaking. She then took a sip and calmly answered honestly. He did not speak further. Just as Jin Wan was about to walk past him to leave the kitchen with the bottle, he abruptly held her in his arms. He pushed the woman who was holding the bottle carefully forward, forcing her against the wall opposite the refrigerator. Seeing that the man was angered by her words, Jin Wan finally believed that he was not as indifferent as he appeared. He could control her emotions and her emotions. It turned out that this man was not always so calm. It turned out that he was also immortal. He also had his emotions. She raised her eyes to look at him. What are you doing? Nanhung and Feng Ling are both outside. Even if you gave them 100 guts, they wouldn't dare to come in. Mo Jingshan's voice was as low and cold as ever. Repeat what you just said. Who are you saying thank you to? Jin Wan, who am I to you? Jin Wan's expression remained the same. Her voice was also calm. You used to be my husband. Then, we suddenly didn't contact each other for an entire month. Who would know who you are to me? Mo Jingshan raised his brows. Aside from throwing a tantrum, your attitude before and after drinking is basically the same. So, you don't intend to give any explanation for drinking behind my back. Why should I explain? Jin Wan calmly looked at him. Why should guard against is not the problem of whether I drink or not, but my heart, right? She could not recall all the words she said that night after getting drunk, but she still had some impression of them. Even though she knew that it was not easy for him to appear, even though she knew how difficult this month had been, she still could not put down her pride, even though some of the mistakes had come from her. But right now, she could not bring herself to smile. After being treated coldly for a month, it was as though she was placed in an ice house. Mo Jingshan's eyes gradually revealed a faint smile. He watched as her stiffened expression was like a disobedient kitten. She was clearly soft and waiting for his touch, yet she insisted on acting stiff and forbidding. He lowered his head and moved closer to her lips. What? You're still so unreasonable now that you're awake? Jin-won rushed to move back, but the man had already kissed her. However, he only kissed her once on the lips before moving away. As she glared at him, he moved his hand away from her shoulders and placed them against the wall behind her. He lowered his eyes to stare at her. "Why are you still angry? It's been a month, and you still haven't figured it out?" The man stood under the kitchen light, his long shadow looming in front of her, blocking out most of the light. "How would I dare to be angry? Just because you threw a tantrum, you were given the cold shoulder for a month. If I were angry because you didn't answer my call, I'm afraid you would directly draw a line with me. Wouldn't you?" Jin-won coldly glanced at him. "Don't stand here and block me. Let me out." With that, she tried to push him away. In the end, her strength was always futile against this man. She pushed him a few times, but he didn't move an inch. Instead, the way he looked at her became deeper and deeper. She turned her eyes away, refusing to look at him. She frowned and said, "Feng Ling is still injured. I don't want to talk to you about not answering my call, compared to you stubbornly wanting to save face and purposely hanging up after one ring. Which one is worse?" Mo Jingshan stared at her face, speaking softly. "That day, when I arrived in High City, I contacted the subsidiary company in advance. There was an emergency meeting, and after I left to university, the company's car came to pick me up. I put my phone on silent mode and placed it by the side. When I looked through the company's documents and picked up my phone, I saw that you had 2 missed calls." Jin-won did not speak, but her gaze remained unkind. "Speaking of which, it's interesting." The man placed his hand against her neck. "In this entire month, the first time you called, you hung up after one ring. The second time you called, it was already a month later. I didn't pick up, and you want a drink to drown your sorrows. Thinking about it, you're indeed living a carefree life. You can be so unrestrained when you're happy or unhappy. Even the reason you want a drink is so perfect." It was clear that these words were purposely mocking. Although the meaning behind it was not deep, it was an ironic mockery. Yet, it was aimed at her vitals. For a moment, Jin-won was speechless. Nanhung and Feng Ling were still outside. She really did not wish to cause any trouble here. Furthermore, the two of them had already stayed in the kitchen for long enough. It was necessary for them to leave. She was about to raise her hand to push him away again, but the man did not let go. "If you still have any grievances, just say it. Don't keep in your heart. Just say it." His gaze was too deep and too intense, binding her tightly against the wall. She couldn't escape, nor could she avoid it. Jin-won looked at Mo Jingshan, who was so close to her, and absent-mindedly recalled the feeling of not being able to touch him for a month. She gritted her teeth and said, "Didn't I already say earlier? How would I dare to have any grievances? In terms of temper, my temper isn't as big as yours. In terms of ruthlessness, I'm also not as ruthless as you." As she spoke, she leaned against the wall even more. Even though the distance between them was only a few hundredths of a millimeter, she still had to move further away. However, she was still in his arms. Mo Jingshan looked at her and then at her, subconsciously resisting his intimacy. His gaze was indifferent, and he did not give her a chance to move further away. He directly leaned down, using an absolutely oppressive posture to deprive her of her freedom. He leaned closer to her lips and said in a low voice, "If you want to calm down, I'll let you calm down. Is a month a long time? Previously, didn't you say that you wanted to live apart from me for 3 months and have a so-called long-distance relationship?" Jin-won, a month was not a long time, but a month without seeing or receiving any news from him was really a very, very long time. It was so long that she began to doubt her life. Jin-won could not hold it in any longer. Since she had already said it to this point, there was no need to suppress it anymore. She abruptly said, "Even if what I said that day may have touched your bottom line, and you're unhappy that I don't trust you, you just left like this for a month. During this month, you just left me hanging. Do you feel at ease?" "I didn't leave you hanging." "Then why didn't you send any news for a month?" "I took the time to resolve a past that shouldn't have existed." "Resolve? Past?" Although he didn't say it directly, Jin-won understood him. A month ago, when she questioned him about that so-called fiancé, he said that he would deal with it. So, it turned out that he went to Chapter 234. So, it turned out that in the past month he had gone to solve those things. How'd he solve them? This man always did everything without batting an eyelid. Jinwon had thought that he was simply angry with her and gave her the cold shoulder for a month. It turned out that he was actually so decisive. She suddenly lowered her eyes. For a moment, she didn't even know what she was angry about. In the past month, had she calmed down? She had indeed calmed down, and she was way too calm. She glanced at Immerse again. On my birthday, you were the one who made the cake. Why didn't you tell me? As she spoke, she puffed up her cheeks unhappily, but this unhappiness didn't come from anger. Instead, she was annoyed that because of what happened in her previous life, she was too subjective and defensive when looking at certain things. Instead, she neglected too much warmth and detail. Perhaps she was only annoyed. You still know that I made those cakes? When I cut them one by one, I didn't see your heart ache, the man said half-jokingly, stroking her hand. You're not angry anymore, eh? What was there to be angry about? Jinwon wasn't that unreasonable. She wouldn't give up a good man. Was she really going to give up this piece of meat to someone else? She wasn't a masochist. Jinwon suddenly pulled down one of his hands that was leaning against the wall behind her. She held his palm that was much larger than her own. It was hard to imagine how he had the energy to make so many cakes for her that day. Whether it was the cream or the base cake, the taste was especially sweet and soft. This man could do everything so well. He was really impeccable. She held his hand in her palm and then held his slender fingers, whispering, Then what do you want as compensation? Immerse looked at her, and his eyes were full of smiles. He held her hand, lowered his head to kiss it, and then leaned over to kiss her lips. He pressed his lips against hers and said hoarsely in a low voice, What do you think I need as compensation? Jinwon's body immediately softened from his kiss. She pursed her lips and said, How about I make 21 dishes for you tonight? After you're done, you're going to throw them away right in front of me? Am I that childish? You mean I'm childish? It had been a long time since Jinwon cooked, especially after she came to T-City. Right now, she was trying to think of ways to make up for her mistake by giving him a chance to take revenge and make him feel good. However, since he didn't appreciate her kindness, she couldn't be blamed. Suddenly, a few dong-dong sound came from the wall outside the kitchen. Nanhung knocked on the wall a few times. You two, don't go too far. You've been in there for so long. Do you need me to take Feng Ling away and leave this room to you? Jinwon subconsciously tugged on Immerse's hand, rushing to leave. However, Immerse did not move. He pulled her back and took the opportunity to hold the little woman who was leaning against the wall to maintain a distance from him. He whispered by her ear, Giving up the room to us is not a bad choice. Jinwon. She pressed her hand against his chest. Feng Ling was just injured, and it's clear that she's being chased by some unknown force. After all, she's someone you hired. You have to be concerned about her safety. How can there be such a cold-blooded boss like you? With Nanhung around, she doesn't need my concern. His words were simple and straightforward. Then, he warned and commanded, In the future, if there's any activity from unknown pursuers or foreigners, you're not allowed to get close. Although Feng Ling's skills aren't bad, her background isn't simple. When a situation is tense, what you need to do is to take care of yourself, understand? Today, when Jinwon rushed into the alley with a baseball bat, it was probably because Feng Ling was there. She believed that Feng Ling would be able to handle it, so she had the confidence to rush in to help. Of course, she had the awareness to protect herself, but she wasn't too weak. Hiding whenever something happened wasn't her style. Of course, she wouldn't let others worry about her. I know. When it's cold, you don't show up. When it's good, you're like a housekeeper. Managing me, Jinwon muttered. Immerse. When Jinwon walked out of the kitchen, she saw that Feng Ling had put on her black sports coat. If it weren't for the fact that she was only wearing underwear inside and couldn't take it off, she would have taken off Nanheng's black t-shirt as well. She saw Feng Ling sitting on the sofa with the coat on, as though the person who was injured earlier was not her. Aside from the fact that her complexion was paler than usual, there was no difference. Was this the reason she had received training? She couldn't even cry out in pain and had to endure all kinds of feelings as though they had never happened. You're finally willing to come out. I thought the two of you would stay in my kitchen until the end of time. Nan Hung leaned against the wall outside the kitchen door with a cold smile. His eyes glanced at Jean Wan's expression, which had softened a lot. Without guessing, he knew that this little woman had probably been coaxed. Mo Jingshen placed his hand on Jean Wan's waist, encircling the little woman who was about to head to the sofa in his arms to prevent her from running away. He glanced at Feng Ling and the medicine box by her feet before shifting his gaze to Nan Hang's side. They went in such a big circle. Was their target her or you? Nan Hang's face was indifferent, and he smiled lazily. We're all working together in 11 base. Their biggest target is either me or her. What's the difference? Mo Jingshen looked at him and said indifferently, Your woman has been injured to this extent. You clearly want to personally uproot the nest of those trash, but now you can lean against here and smile as though nothing has happened. Even Jean Wan isn't as big-hearted as you. Nan Hung, Jean Wan, what did it have to do with her? Mr. Mo, I'm not his woman. Although you're my current boss, please don't put labels on me. Feng Ling spoke up, protesting unhappily. However, Mo Jingshen seemed not to hear her words and only glanced coldly at Nan Hung. Nan Hung was silent for a few seconds and temporarily put away his lazy attitude. These days, women are not easy to raise. Whether they're light or heavy, it's wrong to keep them by your side. It's wrong to let them go. Jean Wan didn't understand his words. Sitting on the sofa, Feng Ling's expression turned cold. Chapter 235. Although Jean Wan was held in Mo Jingshen's arms, she still silently shifted closer to him. Although she could not accurately capture the meaning of their conversation, she could still smell the faint smell of gunpowder. She had long known that Nan Hang's background was not simple, and that the people involved in the arms business could not be simple either. However, she did not expect the severity of the situation to be deeper than she had imagined. In this aspect, it did not only involve the arms business, the country, and the underworld. There were many other problems that Jean Wan had not come into contact with. At this moment, she was only thinking about how Nan Hung was so complicated. What exactly was his relationship with Mo Jingshen and Qin Sighting? She vaguely remembered that Qin Sighting had mentioned that he had saved Feng Ling's life in America. What about Mo Jingshen? What kind of role did he play between them? Compared to the coldness in Nan Hang's eyes and Jean Wan's silent confusion, Mo Jingshen appeared especially unperturbed. The road to death is their own choice. It's not a big price to drag you down with them before they die. It was clear that Mo Jingshen was reminding them. Nan Hung had naturally understood this long ago. Nan Hung curved his thin lips coldly. I didn't bring Feng Ling back to the country purely to be your woman's bodyguard. Since I left her in the country, I've naturally hidden an ambush. If they want to come, they can come. I guarantee that if they come, they will die. Mo Jingshen patted Jean Wan's waist from time to time, his expression mild. Using your own woman as bait, only you, Nan Hung, would do such a cold-blooded and heartless thing. Nan Hung, Mr. Mo, I already knew all the missions and procedures at the base. Everything was my own choice, Feng Ling interrupted. This was probably the first time Feng Ling had spoken up for Nan Hung in front of them, but her tone was clearly cold. Letting a woman protect you, is this something a man should do? Mo Jingshen ignored her, as though he was purposely provoking Nan Hung, throwing a ruthless knife at him. Nan Hung, the way you two are echoing each other, I almost suspect that Feng Ling has been brainwashed by your woman. When did she learn to cooperate with you? Jean Wan suddenly spoke up softly. Nan Hung, Feng Ling was clearly speaking up for you earlier. Doesn't your conscience hurt when you said that? Although she did not understand the situation well, seeing Mo Jingshen, who understood the situation, criticize Nan Hung in such a manner and seemed to be enjoying it, Jean Wan could not help but join in. Nan Hung did not speak again. He suddenly narrowed his eyes coldly and looked meaningfully at Feng Ling. Feng Ling did not continue to say anything. She stood there in the sportswear, stained with blood. By the time she left Nan Hang's hotel, it was already very late. Even if T University didn't have a curfew, Jinwon knew that she wouldn't be able to return to the dorm tonight. Mo Jingshun brought her back to T University's condominium. In the car, she asked, "The solution you mentioned earlier, did you return to America last month? I have to do what I promised you. If I don't go there myself, how can I give you a perfect explanation?" The man's voice was calm and low. It was one thing to guess it, but it was another to hear it from his own mouth. Jinwon's heart immediately beat wildly from the heat. "I'm not too calculative. It's just that what happened that time was too much of a shock to me. In that kind of situation, if I could still maintain my rationality and not question or vent at all, I'm afraid I wouldn't be a normal person. Or perhaps I don't care at all. However, I have no intention of forcing you to do anything, nor do I want to make things difficult for you. It's not difficult. You don't have to worry about this matter. I said I'll handle it, so I'll handle it. I definitely won't leave behind any future troubles." Jinwon glanced at him. Did he mean that the person who wanted to snatch this piece of meat from her mouth was no longer the biggest problem? Although Mo Jingshun might be able to resolve the Gordian, not if he personally took action. But for her, wouldn't it be too unchallenging to be killed before she even saw the enemy? They alighted from the car and returned to the condominium. Mo Jingshun immediately held her hand after alighting. The man's palm coincidentally held onto her hand. She turned to assess him and found that Mo Jingshun seemed to be maintaining his original state at all times. There was never any sudden changes. Regardless of whether it was his personality or his appearance, he was very stable. That night, the reason why I was able to relax enough to drink was because I knew Feng Ling was by my side. That's why I was so at ease. Jinwon glanced at him again. "That day, you didn't really bring me away from the place where I was drinking, did you? Did you not want me to see your drunken appearance when Feng Ling helped you out? Or did you not want me to know that you were so drunk that you couldn't even recognize my face?" When Mo Jingshun heard her mention the matter of drinking, he initially ignored her. Only when he pulled her into the elevator did he cast her an indifferent glance. Jinwon, there was no need to ask. It was clear that he had indeed found her in that bar. So at that time, she couldn't even recognize his face? No, that's not right. At that time, she only thought that she had seen wrongly and thought that it was an illusion. How could she not recognize Mo Jingshun's face? After entering the elevator, Mo Jingshun swiped the elevator card and did not look at her again. Jinwon knew that she had promised him that she would not drink anymore. In the end, she still purposely used alcohol to drown her sorrows. Mo Jingshun did not want to bicker with her over such things when he had just coaxed her. However, it was clear that he was still unhappy with her drinking. Jinwon stood by his side and watched their figures through the elevator door mirror. When their gazes met, she directly leaned against his arm. "In the future, even if I drink, I'll only drink happy alcohol and celebratory alcohol. I won't use alcohol to drown my sorrows or sulk with you anymore." The man finally raised his eyes and glanced at her through the mirror. "You didn't even plan on not touching a single drop of alcohol. Happy alcohol? You sure know how many lines you'll cut off when you drink." Jinwon pursed her lips. The elevator stopped at the apartment floor, and she followed him out of the elevator. Before returning, they sat down at Nanhang's place and had some food with everyone. Jinwon was not hungry now. After entering the door, she turned on the light and had just changed her shoes when she saw Mo Jingshun put on the gray indoor slippers. The man who had disappeared for a whole month had returned just like that. The emptiness in her heart was instantly filled. For a moment, she couldn't tell what kind of feeling she was feeling, but inexplicably, she was relieved. Recently, Jinwon's schedule was too unhealthy, and she was used to being sleepy. After all, it was almost 11 o'clock. She took off her coat and went straight into the bathroom, planning to take a shower and go to bed. Because she was too sleepy, she didn't even soak in a bathtub, but directly took a shower under the shower head. However, the bathroom door suddenly opened. She raised her sleepy face and didn't react for a moment. She only saw the man in a shirt and trousers step on the water stains on the ground and come over in the white mist. The man's arm circled her waist, and with the other hand, he turned off the bathtub and immediately picked her up by the waist. Jinwon was a little sleepy. "I haven't finished my shower yet. What are you doing? Let's shower together later. Dash. Chapter 236. Jinwan was carried out of the bathroom by him. She didn't even have a towel, let alone clothes. Naked, she was directly brought out of the bathroom by the man. What time is it now? Although Jinwan was sleepy, every time he touched her whole body was extremely sensitive. In addition, she wasn't wearing any clothes, and the slightly cold indoor air touched her skin, making her particularly sensitive. He was going to carry her back to the bedroom, but because she was naked, Jinwan squirmed uncomfortably in his arms. He finally couldn't restrain himself. Although he hadn't touched her for more than a month and wouldn't do anything to his lower body every day, the moment this woman pressed against his arms, the self-control Mo Jingshin was most proud of instantly disappeared. The man's sudden kiss was slightly more urgent than Jinwan had expected. Before they reached the bedroom, he pressed her down on the long table behind the sofa with several books. Although this seemingly gentle man style in bed was never as gentle as his appearance, Jinwan still couldn't resist him. Mo Jingshin, be gentle. He lowered his head to kiss her. He made a vague sound and didn't show any signs of slowing down. She protested softly. Let's go back to the bedroom. He kissed her lips and chuckled hoarsely. No, I can't wait. Jinwan, it's only a few steps from the bedroom. Do you think it's necessary? Including the half a month before your birthday, I've been a vegetarian for almost a month and a half. Do you think it's necessary? The man's hot and husky breath pressed against her ear. He kissed and bit her earlobe, burning the sensitive spot on her ear. Do you think your husband is a saint? Do you think he can watch you close the door and sleep after taking a shower? But it's cold and hard here. Being stared at by the man's ink-like eyes, Jinwan suddenly felt that she was about to burn. She forced herself to appear calm and composed, but in fact, a small flame had already leaped up in her heart, burning brighter and brighter. Just as she finished speaking, the man who had been pressing her against the table easily exerted a little force. Her entire body was suddenly turned around, and in an instant, she was leaning against the edge of the table and holding her in his arms. The man pinched her chin and kissed her again. He pried open her teeth and attacked her. He swept across her teeth even more fiercely and domineeringly than usual, bringing her into his mouth and kissing her inch by inch, not letting go of any part of her. It had indeed been a while since they were intimate. Jinwan thought she was very calm in this regard. Although Mo Jingshin teased her until she couldn't control herself, at least the two of them had gone through the stage of inseparable entanglement. These few months of separation shouldn't be a big deal, but this sudden and different kind of stimulation, in this kind of place, in this kind of position, Mo Jingshin clearly took into consideration that it had been a while since she last did it, and that it would be difficult for her to adapt. Although he was already like an arrow on the bowstring, he still patiently released her. Soft and dense kisses landed on her neck and ears. He sucked on her earlobe, bit on her collarbone, and moved downwards. Jinwan was stimulated to the point that the corners of her eyes turned red. She bit down and was forced to shrink back. The living room light landed on her fair, delicate, and beautiful skin. She softly and hoarsely said, "Don't." The man ignored her. His hand slid down the white skin of her thigh. Jinwan moaned softly and sobbed. Mo Jingshin. What did you call me? Mo Jingshin's hand paused. He darkly glanced at her. Jinwan, hubby. It had been a while since she called him this. She couldn't react in time. In the end, her soft and delicate voice caused the man's gaze to darken. Jinwan saw his extremely dark and thick gaze. When he looked at her, it was clear that he would not give her any leeway or chance to retreat. Tonight, he would definitely not let her off so easily. Mo Jingshin lowered his eyes, watching the woman he had been holding in his arms the entire time. Because of his teasing, she was sitting weakly on his lap. Her exquisite, fair body was exposed under the light. The veins on his forehead were about to pop. Do you really like to call me by my full name? His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. His head moved closer to her ear, softly and unhurriedly saying, "In a while, I'll let you shout to your heart's content. Remember not to cry." The man's brazen threat caused Jinwan to involuntarily shrink into his embrace. She felt that there was really no way for her to sleep tonight. Without waiting for her to speak, his still mischievous fingers directly invaded her. "Even if you cry, I won't let you off," Jinwan whimpered, unconsciously shrinking her body. Her entire body was dyed with a faint rose color. Her hands trembled as she grabbed his arm, using an undetectable amount of strength to push him away. "Wait a minute, should we first decide on a time to end? If I don't sleep for an entire night, I really won't be able to take it. I can't wait." Mo Jingshen did not give her any chance to speak. The movement of his fingers had already brought out all of her senses, which she could no longer control. Jinwan buried her head into his neck, her nails digging into his back. Her lower lip was bitten until there was a white mark. Her entire body was stimulated to the point that her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. A drop of water flowed out from the corner of her eyes. "I still have classes tomorrow. You're suspended from classes tomorrow." The man bit down on her neck, his voice extremely hoarse. "Suspended? What suspended? How did you know? I didn't even hear about it. As an investor of T University's library, I've directly given you the title of an honorary principal. If I say that classes will be suspended tomorrow, who dares to not do so?" Jinwan, tomorrow was the weekend, and it was true that there were only a few classes in Professor Lin's class that would occasionally have supplementary classes. Even if classes were suspended for a day, it would not have much of an impact. However, she never expected that the man who had always been so calm in the company would actually have such a domineering side for the sake of his own selfishness. If she did not feed him tonight, it was possible that T University would have to suspend classes for an entire week starting tomorrow. Jinwan was slightly distracted, and Mo Jingshin suddenly placed his hand on the back of her head, placing a gentle and light kiss on her forehead. He kissed her hair while his other finger slowly inched inwards inch by inch, causing Jinwan's trembling whimper. Jinwan's suppressed voice was as soft as a kitten's. Each sound crashed into his eardrums, grinding against the restraints he had forced out in order to allow her to adapt as quickly as possible. Chapter 237. The light in the living room became ambiguous. Jinwan could barely hold it in. He looked at her, his low chuckle causing her ears to turn red. He pressed against her waist, pressing against her slightly. Even through her clothes, she could feel the heat. She shrank back from the pressure. Afraid that she would fall, she held on to his shoulder, pressing against him even more. Mo Jingshin seemed to be able to completely control her nerves. Jinwan's waist softened. She wanted to close her legs, but could only whimper against his neck because of this position. It was as though she was instinctively yearning for more, but also as though she was faintly resisting this surging tide of passion. Seeing her like this, Mo Jingshin could no longer hold it in and was about to press her back onto the table. He was just about to move when a voice abruptly rang by his ear. Jinwan's phone rang. She immediately struggled. Phone. Mo Jingshin furrowed his brows. "Ignore it." As he spoke, his fingertips pressed deeper. Jinwan bit down on her voice and pushed his hand away. "It's getting late. It's either because there's something urgent in the studio in High City or because there might be something at school. If Professor Lin has something important to inform me, it won't be good if I miss it." Mo Jingshin glanced at her. It was clear that he did not intend to let her go. However, Jinwan immediately tensed up at his arms. If he did not let her answer the phone now, his temper that had just calmed down would most likely surge again. He finally released some of his strength. Jinwan wanted to get up from his body, but her legs were too weak to move. She looked awkwardly at the phone on the sofa. "Go and get it for me." Sitting on him, she ordered him around, taking advantage of the fact that she had been seduced by him. Mo Jingshan did not say anything more. He held her waist with one hand and brought her up, while the other went to the sofa to pick up the phone. Jinwan's whole body was still soft. She lay on him until the man sat on the sofa with her in his arms. She leaned over and was about to hide, but he didn't let go at all. As he handed the phone to her, he still let her sit on his lap and signaled her to take it with his eyes. Jinwan was helpless. Without looking at the caller ID, she put the phone to her ear. Hello? The little woman in his arms had just been stimulated, and her eyes were watery. Her lips had also been kissed until they were dark red, and her chest was faintly discernible. Her long, undried hair was tangled around her body like seaweed. What a vixen! Mo Jingshan's Adam's apple bobbed. He decided to close his eyes and place his hand on his brow. He leaned against the sofa and patiently waited for her to finish her call. His lower body was tightly pressed against hers, and the hardness that could not be ignored was pressed against her through the fabric. Jinwan did not dare to move. Ling Feifei's questioning voice abruptly came through the phone. Jinwan, why didn't you and Feng Ling return to the dormitory today? Although Jinwan and Ling Feifei did not have a good relationship, she never had to explain her whereabouts to anyone. For Ling Feifei to suddenly call to question her in the middle of the night, Jinwan instinctively felt that it was strange. I'm outside, what's wrong? Is something the matter? Jinwan patiently asked. It's nothing much. It's just that a diamond watch I bought before coming to T-City has disappeared. A few days ago, it was still in the dormitory. Yesterday, it suddenly disappeared. I originally wanted to ask if you guys saw it, but in the past 2 days, you and Feng Ling coincidentally didn't come back to stay. I can't help but be suspicious. So, when are you guys coming back? Ling Feifei's tone was unkind. Jinwan was extremely annoyed with people like Ling Feifei. There was not a single day where she could rest. How could there be so many problems? What diamond watch? She had never even seen one before. Could it be that she had been unhappy for a while and was thinking of ways to frame someone and create more trouble? She was quiet for a moment before coldly saying, Do I look like I'd be interested in a diamond watch that's worth at most 100,000? Or would Feng Ling be interested in something that's embedded with diamonds? Wouldn't you call the police if you lost something? Calling me? Are you hoping to find it in my cabinet or bag? Don't you think your motive is too deliberate? The person on the other side of the phone seemed to choke from her precise words. After several seconds of silence, she abruptly reprimanded. In any case, there are only these few people in the dormitory. Usually no one comes in. So what if you can afford to buy a gown that's worth $1 million? What if that's all your savings? I've seen people who borrow money to act cool, let alone someone like you. Who knows if you're using all your money to act cool? My watch is lost, but where are you and Feng Ling right now? Even if I want to call the police, I have to call you suspects back. Otherwise, if you guys escape, where am I going to find you? Crazy. It's none of your business when I go back, but you have to remember that both my and Feng Ling's cabinets have a separate password lock, and the number of times it can be opened is limited. When the password lock is opened, the connected phone software will also record it. Once my and Feng Ling's cabinets have been opened in the past few days and what was put in them, the police may find out. Are you sure you want to play such childish tricks? The person on the other side of the phone fell silent. Just as Jinwan was about to hang up, he angrily hung up first. Why were there always people in this world who liked to find trouble? Did their brains grow under their feet, or did they think they were too scheming and could easily be pinched like a bun? However, Jinwan was not in the mood to consider whether he was stupid or not. She threw her phone back on the sofa and put her hands on the man's chest. Her legs were still a little weak. She was about to jump out of his arms when she had just calmed down, but the man abruptly pressed her back down. What call did you pick up? Mo Jingshan clearly saw the impatience and disgust in Jinwan's eyes. It was rare to see her show such obvious dislike towards someone. A lunatic in the dormitory. I don't know if she has persecutory delusions or likes to mindlessly make her presence known. Ignore her. I can't be bothered to mention such a person. Jinwan had just answered when she felt the man's body pressing closer and closer. Jinwan's emotions and feelings that had slightly moved away were instantly pulled back by his action. She watched as he held her waist with one hand and unbuttoned his clothes with the other. The buttons of his shirt were unbuttoned by him single-handedly. This visual effect was truly indescribably seductive, especially the man's gaze, which was very deep and dark. Are you really not going to return to the bedroom? Earlier, he clearly waited for her to answer the phone. Chapter 238. I'll go back in a bit. The man had yet to finish speaking when Jean Wan's leg was abruptly held by him. Her vision suddenly spun as she was pressed against the sofa by the man. She raised her eyes to meet the man's dark and deep eyes. In an instant, she actually began to stutter. "You control yourself, However, before she could finish her words, the man had already grabbed her ankle, which was forced up by this position, and abruptly pounced on her. He held her chin and kissed her face. Jean Wan's hair was messy, and her face was flushed. She was so charming that it was indescribable. Soft moans escaped from her mouth. It was as though she was enjoying it, but at the same time, it was as though she was being tortured. She subconsciously clenched the sofa beneath her. The man bent down to kiss her sweaty face. His voice was tight and hoarse as he pressed against her soft lips, asking vaguely, "Did you miss me?" And then, right now, Jean Wan could no longer understand what he was referring to. "Are you still going to throw a tantrum with me in the future? And how can I guarantee that my emotions will always be at the same level? It can't be that I won't even allow you to throw a tantrum. You can throw a tantrum, but you can't throw a tantrum, especially when it's related to misunderstandings. If you can clear it up, then clear it up. You're not allowed to lock yourself in the room again, and you're not allowed to let your imagination run wild." At such a time, the man was shockingly calm. Although his voice was hoarse, he slammed against the sofa even harder, causing Jean Wan's mind to go blank. She was completely unable to hear what he was saying. Mo Jingshan controlled his temper and asked hoarsely again, "Are you still going to lock yourself in the room and not come out?" This time, Jean Wan roughly heard it clearly. She opened her eyes slightly and looked at the man above her. His eyes were like the surging waves of the boundless ocean. They were heavy and focused on her body. Jean Wan looked at his gaze and felt as though she was about to drown. Her heart beat wildly. Jean Wan felt that she really wasn't rational enough at that time. Previously, she was stubborn and wanted to save her face. Right now, even that bit of temper that she shouldn't have was gone. He bent down and pressed his lips against hers. It was a very light, delicate, and gentle kiss. The sensations beneath her grew more intense with each layer, almost drowning her. Jean Wan raised her arms and wrapped them around the man's neck with some difficulty. She pressed her burning face against his chin, her voice tender and soft with hints of naturalness and tenderness. "I love you." Mo Jingshan's movements did not stop. In fact, he became even more ferocious and intense than before. When he heard these two words, he looked at her, and his ink-black gaze deepened. He suddenly kissed her again, stealing away her breath. Jean Wan. After starving for so long, she knew that she could not help. Jean Wan didn't know which of her words had agitated him, but those two words suddenly spilled out of her mouth based on her feelings. Afterward, she almost forgot what she had said to him, but this night, she was tormented from inside out by this man. In the end, when she was so stimulated that she almost lost her voice from crying, the man abruptly bit her lips, swallowed her hoarse voice, and pressed her firmly into his arms. The next morning, Mo Jingshan's biological clock was earlier and more punctual than Jean Wan's. Although Jean Wan slept soundly in his arms, when the man rose, she still felt something. However, she was too tired to open her eyes. The man who had just gotten up gently lifted the quilt and got up so as not to wake her up. He seemed to have been watching her for a long time. The two of them had been together for a long time. Even if Jean Wan didn't open her eyes, she could feel the man's gaze on her face. He was very focused and did not move away for a long time. Just when she was half asleep and considering whether she should get up directly, the man kissed her on the face and got out of bed. This sense of security allowed Jean Wan's tired heart to regain its footing. She hugged the blanket and turned over to continue sleeping. It was already past 8 o'clock when he finished showering, changed his clothes, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for her. When he returned to the bedroom, the woman on the bed had already sat up, but she still had a sleepy expression on her face. Her hair was messy and scattered behind her shoulders, and she was wearing the nightgown he had helped her change into last night after taking a shower. Jean Wan really did not have enough sleep. Last night, this man was really too cruel and inhumane. However, Right now, she was indeed hungry. She smelled the scent of breakfast, and it was even made by great boss Missouri himself. Just the smell alone was enough to entice her to wake up. Mo Jingshen casually buttoned his sleeves, walking toward the bed with his long legs. "You're awake? Get up and wash up. Have breakfast." Jinwan raised her sleepy eyes. "Can I come back to sleep for a while after breakfast?" When she raised her eyes, she saw that the man had already finished washing up. His black shirt was different from the white one from yesterday, but it was still incomparably handsome. His well-dressed appearance made it hard for one to associate him with the energetic and unrestrained beast from last night. He was as clean and handsome as ever, perfect to the point of being impeccable. "Get up and eat first. After eating, walk around the room to digest before sleeping. Otherwise, you'll get indigestion." The man most likely knew how bad he was last night and did not force her to get up. He said in a heavy voice, "The breakfast is still warm. Do you want to wait until it's cold before eating?" Jinwan rushed to remove the blankets. The soreness between her legs was too obvious. She stood up and changed her posture several times before finally finding a more comfortable position to walk out. "Classes are really suspended today?" When she walked to the dining table, she saw the long-awaited Mo Jingshan breakfast. She yawned as she reluctantly went to wash up. She could only eat after washing up. "And classes are suspended, so you can continue sleeping at home. There's no need to worry about whether you'll miss Professor Lin's class." The man placed the cutlery on the table. Jinwan stood in the bathroom to brush her teeth. There was clearly a bathroom in the bedroom. Although she had seen this side of Mo Jingshan before, it was truly rare. She really wanted to see it, so she stood there and brushed her teeth while watching the man's back view under the morning sun. After washing up, they sat down to eat. Mo Jingshan understood her appetite very well. He made just enough food for 2 people. However, after eating with him, Jinwan did not move from her seat. She looked at the man who was about to take the dishes to the dishwasher and raised her face to say, "I'm not full yet. I want to eat another bowl of noodles. A small bowl is fine too." Chapter 239. Jinwan was clearly acting coquettishly. Even her tone was soft. Mo Jingshan rubbed her head. "Are you sure?" Jinwan nodded. "I'm sure." If Mo Jingshan's memory was correct, the amount of food she ate for breakfast was just right. However, from her expression, it seemed like she was not full yet. "What kind of noodles do you want to eat?" "Anything is fine as long as you cook it." "Are you sure you can still eat?" And he did not ask further. "Wait, I'll go cook." Jinwan was really not purposely acting coquettishly. After being tormented by the man for an entire night, it was only right for her to ask for some interest. Furthermore, her appetite had increased significantly recently. Although her weight did not increase, and she was still as thin as before, every bowl of Mo Jingshan's breakfast made of love counted. After all, it was something that could only be chanced upon. 3 days later. "Jinwan, it's been several days since you've returned to the dormitory. You mustn't be late for Professor Lin's morning class today. I heard from Professor Lin that the person who invested in T University's library has officially become our school's honorary principal. This morning, there will be a meeting with the school leaders in front of all the teachers and students. The honorary principal should also say a few words. I'm not sure what the situation will be like today, but right now, the students around me are all very excited. You must remember not to be late." Bai Wei kept urging her over the phone. "Jinwan, I understand. I'll be there soon." "Hurry up, you can't be absent today." All right, I'll be there soon." Jinwan hung up the phone while glancing at the so-called T University's newly appointed honorary principal who was resting with his eyes closed in the back of the car. Bai Wei's call was naturally to remind her not to be absent. After all, the MO corporation status in the country was not simple. For the business and enterprise management students, to have the opportunity to interact with the rumored CEO MO was indeed a grand event that they could not miss. "You'll be going to T University today?" She looked at the man and asked with some hesitation. Mo Jingshan glanced at her and reached out to pull her in. He kissed her face and warmly said, "I was strongly requested by your school leader to speak a few words." I'm not interested in such an occasion. But since I've already given T University so much face for you, I'll do my best to see it through to the end. N. That's right. After all, since Mo Jingshun had agreed to invest in T University, he wasn't joking. No matter what, he had already shouldered the responsibility for this matter. Besides, he was already an investor on the board of directors and an honorary principal. If he didn't give T University any face, he would basically be treating the school leaders like playthings. Jinwan could see that Mo Jingshen was considerate and polite to the managers of the education industry, so she wouldn't embarrass them too much. At this time, the driver was driving, and Jinwan and Mo Jingshen were in the back row. Mo Jingshen didn't let go of her after hugging her, nor did he let her go back to her seat. When he passed by a traffic light intersection, his phone rang. When they reached a traffic light, his Mo said, Mo, he answered the call. After crossing the intersection, they had already arrived at T University. Jinwan saw that she was going to be late. Seeing that Mo Jingshen was on the phone, she did not waste any time. She threw him a glance, nodded politely at the driver, and got out of the car. Mo Jingshen listened to the call. A moment later, he was quiet and indifferent. Where are they now? Hearing the reply, Mo Jingshen's gaze was calm and unruffled. I got it. Jinwan thought he was going to have a meeting. In the end, all the teachers and students entered T University's largest stadium at the same time. The 7,000 to 8,000 students were all seated. She did not expect there to be such a big crowd. As expected, no matter how low-key Mo Jingshen was, his status was still there. If someone wanted to invite him to say a few words, they did not dare to put on a show for fear of being neglected. But there were too many people. T University Stadium had a capacity of around 15,000 people. Right now, half of the seats were filled with students. The other half was covered by a curtain, and only this half was open. Because they were basking in Professor Lin's light, the students in his class were all seated in the first 3 rows. They could clearly see the person on the stage. Behind them, several students were discussing in low voices. I wonder what the legendary CEO Mo looks like. I heard he's very handsome. Haven't you seen CEO Mo's photo? He's already very handsome. Ah, do you have a photo of him? I haven't been able to find it. Most of the photos I've found on the internet are from his side profile or from a blurry angle taken by business reporters. I've never seen his face, but just his side profile is already very mesmerizing. I reckon he's super handsome. He has to be super handsome. Do you think that Hai Cheng's 2 male gods, Nanqin and Bei Mo, are just rumors? Then hurry and show me the photo. I don't have any either. It's only from his side profile, but I've studied every angle. It's enough to confirm that CEO Mo is a 360-degree man with no blind spots. He's so handsome that it's suffocating. They were still whispering to each other, but Jinwan glanced at the school leaders on the stage, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. In fact, there were times when a student's world was very simple. Although she did not like it when her man was stared at by various women who drooled over him, right now, she really felt as though she was sitting among her husband's fangirls. Even Bai Wei, who was usually calm and collected, was clearly filled with strong anticipation as she sat by Jinwan's side. There was no need to mention Ling Feifei, who sat by the side. Her eyes were about to pierce through the curtains, wanting to drill in to see if the legendary CEO Mo had arrived. T-City could not be compared to High City. No matter what, the people here did not interact much with the Mo Corporation. Even in High City, there was basically no chance of meeting Mo Jingshen. However, at the very least, the people there had a good understanding of the Mo Corporation's background. Although Mo Jingshen had many fangirls, most of the unmarried young ladies in High City had already seen through reality. They knew that this man was unattainable. Although there were still a few weirdos who persisted in finding trouble with Jinwan, they were basically negligible existences. Seeing that the school leaders were still speaking, everyone sat quietly and chatted for a while before feeling bored. They did not know when CEO Mo would come out. After watching for a while, Bai Wei also turned toward Ling Feifei. She casually asked, "You said you lost that diamond watch for several days. Have you found it?" "Not yet. When Ling Feifei answered, her gaze suddenly seemed to inadvertently shift toward Jinwan. Jinwan, on the other hand, calmly and coldly looked back at her, meeting her gaze. Only then did Ling Feifei quickly turn away, no longer meeting her gaze. Chapter 240. At this moment, the lights in the stadium suddenly dimmed. The school leaders on the stage used an extremely solemn tone to welcome the honorary principal. After the thunderous applause, there was a moment of silence. No one dared to make sound. He was clearly her husband, but at this moment, Jinwan actually felt a little nervous under such an atmosphere. This was the first time she had seen Mo Jingshen in such an occasion. She did not know what kind of serious and cold role he would play here today. When Mo Jingshen's figure finally appeared on the stage, almost all the young ladies below the stage sucked in a breath. The man who was eagerly invited onto the stage by several school leaders was already standing on the podium on the right side of the stage. In front of him was the podium. Behind him was a large screen with T University's logo against a blue sky. On the screen were soaring white clouds. Mo Jingshen was wearing a white shirt, but it was not swallowed by the white on the screen. Instead, it was especially eye-catching. He was not as Jinwan had imagined. She had thought that he would be dressed in a strict and cold black suit today. She had thought that he would use the most decisive and ruthless methods to catch people off guard in certain important meetings. She had thought that with the title of honorary principal, he would wear a suit and tie like the other school leaders and even hold a microphone in his hand with a solemn expression. But he did not. He was dressed casually in a shirt and trousers. It did not seem deliberate at all. One of the expensive and exquisite buttons on his collar was casually undone, and his sleeves were rolled up to his forearms. Although Mo Jingshen was in a high position, he was still the youngest and most outstanding person in the country's upper class. With his own ability, he had built up the Mo Corporation in just a few years. Furthermore, with his own strategies and means, he had squeezed into the highest position in the country's business world. He was a business god whose net worth was unattainable by countless people. Furthermore, behind him stood the Mo family and America's Shine Group, which were both extremely important. Everything related to Mo Jingshen was a vast number of figures in the country's unfathomable domestic business system. Yet his appearance at this moment was extremely casual and indifferent. "Oh my God, so handsome." Around them, soft sighs of admiration could be heard. Some people were even discussing Mo Jingshen's age. Some said that Mo Jingshen appeared to be around the same age as most of the male students in T University, while others said that a man like Mo Jingshen, who was at the peak of his career, should be at least 30 years old and only looked young. Right now, Jinwan was the only one who knew the exact answer. Most university graduates were around 23 years old. Mo Jingshen was only 3 years older than them. Many of the students present were those who had been held back or re-enrolled. They were around the same age as him, but they were still under the school's management. Their appearances and experiences were simple and ordinary. Even the school hunks of T University's female students paled in comparison to him. However, the man on the stage was very low-key and simple even today. The man was so clean that he didn't even need to do any styling. Under the stage lights, his deep, pitch-black brows and eyes were beautiful and distinct. It was completely indescribable with words. Such a man couldn't be replicated by anyone. This man stood there, only a faint smile, but in an instant, other than him, the sun and moon lost their light. "Everyone, this is the first time we've met." Mo Jingshen stood behind the podium that was commonly seen in schools. He held the microphone on it, one hand casually resting on the podium while the other gently raised the microphone. His pale lips carried 3 parts of a smile and 7 parts of calmness and indifference. The man's tone was casual and not deliberate at all. It was as if he was not invited to speak, but as if he was facing a group of young people who had yet to officially step into society. He put down his identity and gave everyone a simple smile in a polite and approachable manner. He said, "I'm Mo Jingshen." With just this sentence, the audience immediately applauded thunderously. Jinwan also rushed to applaud. However, looking at the man who was the center of attention on the stage, looking at his otherworldly calm and indifference, looking at this well-dressed man, she inexplicably recalled the scene last night when she was pressed down on the bed by him. She really couldn't see any trace of him being fierce to her in bed for the past few nights. What kind of man was he exactly? He could calmly control the overall situation in the company. The life and death of many small and medium-sized enterprises and many business strategies were in his hands. He clearly had a pair of hands that could move clouds and rain with one turn of the hand. Yet he was very close to Nan Hung, a person who had a complicated background and was wandering on the fringes of the foreign arms business. Furthermore, he could stand here with the title of T University's honorary principal. I'm very grateful to all the students of T University for coming here and having a pleasant and simple meeting with me. Everyone below the stage was quiet. The boys looked up at the man standing at the top, each of them thinking about whether they would one day have such an achievement. The girls looked up at the man, but at the same time, they were also tempted and drooling. As everyone knows, T University is the most high-end institution of higher learning in the country. It nurtures numerous talents for the country's economy and various large enterprises. From now on, MO Corporation will not only invest in the reconstruction of T University's century-old library, but we have also reached an agreement with T University to choose T University as our first choice in the future's recruitment fairs. At this point, MO Jingshan's smiling gaze shifted to Jin Wan, who was sitting in the third row in front of him. Jin Wan's position was not particularly obvious, but the man's gaze had already landed on her face. In the gymnasium that held several thousand people, everyone was looking seriously at the man on the stage. However, because of his gaze, the solemn crowd suddenly began to whisper among themselves. They were all asking, what was CEO MO looking at? Which direction was he looking at? The school leaders also subconsciously looked in that direction because of his gaze. However, the lights on the stage were too dim. They could not make out the students' faces and could not tell who he was looking at. While everyone was curious, MO Jingshan calmly withdrew his gaze. He unhurriedly curved his lips into a perfect curve and raised his hand to indicate for everyone to stay focused. In an instant, Jin Wan's heart that had been raised to her throat slowly calmed down. Chapter 241. His actions immediately attracted everyone's attention. They were originally wondering who CEO MO was looking at earlier, but now they had all raised their heads to stare unwaveringly at him. Jin Wan was suddenly very nervous. Previously, she had clearly said that she did not want to expose anything in these few months at T University. However, MO Jingshan's earlier glance was really too dangerous. Ling Fei, who was seated by Jin Wan's side, already felt her heart churning. She recalled that earlier CEO MO seemed to be looking at her. Ling Fei wondered if CEO MO was looking at her earlier. She shyly raised her hand to press against her cheeks. She was so agitated that her hands were trembling. The students seated here must have grown tired of hearing the so-called official words in your more than 10 years of student life. What's more, you're tired of listening to the various polite speeches you've long memorized. MO Jingshan's voice was clear and indifferent. Very good. If you're not willing to listen, I'm not willing to speak. The group of students below the stage immediately laughed. Great Boss Mo's words had really struck straight at their hearts. I'm a businessman, and I travel the business world. In the past 2 years, I've indeed been invited by several local business universities to be a visiting professor in the management department or business department. However, I've rejected them all. I really don't have the time or energy. Teaching and educating people is a noble profession. An executioner like me, who has mingled in a bloody business world, is not suitable for it. Everyone below the stage held their breaths to listen. This is T University. The majority of those seated here are aiming for the business department. In the future, a large portion of you will also be involved in the business world. The reason why I use the words bloody business is naturally not to frighten you. You'll be learning all sorts of knowledge here. I don't need to elaborate on what you're all aiming for by enrolling here. After all, T University's full name has the word business behind it. This isn't a playground, but a military camp for war preparations outside of the battlefield. Since I've already been given the title of an honorary principal, I should be mainly encouraging you. However, as I've said earlier, you've heard enough official words. Mo Jingshin's tone changed, and his faint smile abruptly disappeared. This is the reserve base for domestic business talents. Everyone has a dream, but if it's so easy to reach your dreams, you wouldn't have gone through so many trials and gone through so many difficulties to obtain a letter of acceptance. Do you think that just because you've entered T University, there will already be famous companies waving at you? Do you think that just because you've entered T University, you'll naturally be able to inherit your family's business? Mo Jingshin chuckled. You're wrong. To enter this place, you have to put in 10 times the effort. Furthermore, this is just the beginning. The laughter of the girls below the stage gradually died down, and the light in the eyes of the boys also changed a little. Do you think you can spread your wings and soar after graduating? He laughed again. In the big melting pot of the shopping mall, where people kill without spilling blood, only 1 out of 100 people can stand. No one below the stage was laughing anymore. What do you want to do here? Aside from learning basic skills, you also need to train your heart. In this short period of time, there are already some who are destined to be eliminated. If you don't want to be eliminated, start working hard today. At least it's better than being chased off the stage. You'll be able to grasp the tail of opportunity better. This was a psychological attack. After all, the students who were able to enter T University all thought of themselves as very capable and proud. There were also many business students who had their eyes on the top of their heads and thought that they were unparalleled in the world. Only this kind of psychological attack would be able to get them to listen. It was also the most effective type. Initially, the school leaders were scared witless, thinking that CEO Mo was here to tear them down. However, after listening to the end, they finally put on smiles of admiration and joy. Amidst the silence, only Jean Wan smiled. To be able to speak so patiently to a group of students, she had truly witnessed another side of Mo Jingshin. She did not laugh out loud, nor was it very sudden. However, Mo Jingshin's gaze suddenly landed on her face. The faint smile on the man's lips did not diminish, but the color of his eyes deepened. After pausing for a moment, he smiled slightly and aimed at the microphone, asking clearly, the female student in the third row, 5 seats away from Professor Lin, can you tell me, why are you smiling? Jinwon, translator, Henyi Translations editor. Henyi Translations in the silent stadium. The thousands of students immediately turned their gazes to the direction of the third row, searching for the person 5 seats away from Professor Lin. The people in the back row couldn't see clearly, and the people in the front row couldn't see clearly because the lights were too dim. Only those closest to Jean Wan were able to accurately direct their gazes toward Jean Wan's face. Amidst the silence, Jean Wan watched the smiling man on the stage. He was smiling, but in her heart, she was gritting her teeth. He did it on purpose. Thus, intentionally. This speech was indeed not very official. From initial blow to the final uplifting speech, it was truly fascinating. When Mo Jingshun placed the microphone down and turned to leave the stage, there were still many students who wished for him to continue speaking. The school leaders once again began to speak about various official pleasantries. After another half an hour, they finally ended. The students all rushed out of the stadium. Jean Wan was originally about to leave with everyone when Ling Feifei suddenly turned back. Her sharp eyes caught sight of Mo Jingshun, who was currently speaking with the school leaders behind the curtains. Seeing that Mo Jingshin had not left, she abruptly and quietly turned back by herself. Bai Wei saw Ling Feifei's stealthy and sneaky movements and turned to look at her. At the same time, she also noticed the scene behind the curtains. "AI, Jinwan." Bai Wei softly called out to Jinwan, gently tapping her arm. "Jinwan, what is it? Look behind you." Bai Wei lowered her voice. Jinwan raised her brows and turned back. After taking a glance, she understood. These few days, she's lost her diamond watch and stirred up other things. Clearly, She's trying to find fault with you, and Feng Ling didn't come today. So I'm afraid she'll take advantage of the fact that the school leaders are here to say something about you. She's really too unreliable. She can easily splash dirty water on others. Come, let's follow her to take a look. Bai Wei held Jinwan's hand and turned to head back. Jinwan did not mind this. Ling Feifei's brainless actions were not worth her concern. However, seeing that Ling Feifei was clearly heading in Mo Jingxin's direction, she did not reject and turned back with Bai Wei. Chapter 242. Whatever you do, we'll do the same. Our legs are on everyone's bodies. Are we not allowed to come over? Bai Wei calmly retorted. Ling Feifei. Her expression was unhappy as she turned back to look at Mo Jingxin. The curtains and screens had already been removed. The students had either left or were queuing up by the entrance. Only Jinwan, Bai Wei, and Ling Feifei remained below the stage. They appeared suspicious and immediately attracted the attention of the school leaders. Jinwan, Bai Wei, and Ling Feifei stood below the stage. The few of you, why aren't you leaving the stadium? What are you looking at? The school leaders immediately turned back to look at them in dissatisfaction. Hurry up and leave. Don't peek here. Ling Feifei rushed to speak up. Headmaster, we still have some doubts about what CEO Mo said earlier. We wish to discuss it with CEO Mo. Originally, she should have said, but Ling Feifei ended up saying giving the opportunity to be scolded to Jinwan and Bai Wei. Bai Wei silently rolled her eyes. Jinwan slightly raised her brows. Mo Jingxin only glanced over there. When he caught a glimpse of Jinwan's figure among them, he remained calm and turned around. What do you want to discuss? Jinwan's eyes were still calm. What do you want to discuss? Ling Feifei did not expect that after President Mo heard her words, he would actually take notice. She immediately ignored the glare of the school leaders and quickly walked over. Hello, President Mo. I'm a business management student taught by Professor Lin. My name is Ling Feifei. My family is from the Ling Corporation Bank. After hearing her name, Mo Jingxin had already turned to look at the other two people who had yet to approach. Seeing that CEO Mo was looking at them, Ling Feifei's heart was filled with displeasure. However, she forced a smile and said, those two are in the same class as me. They also live in the same dormitory. Like me, they're both Professor Lin's students. The school leaders saw that these female students were clearly here to pester or spout nonsense. They were about to step forward to stop them when Mo Jingxin's gaze caused them to retreat. Oh, they're all Professor Lin's students? Mo Jingxin smiled. It seemed like when CEO Mo mentioned the person 5 seats away from Professor Lin, he did not pay attention to Jinwan's appearance at all. It had only been a short while, but he did not recognize that they were the ones sitting very close to Professor Lin. The smile on Ling Feifei's face deepened. She suddenly said sweetly, CEO Mo, I really don't quite understand what you just said. If you're not busy, would you mind having a meal together? The school leaders, Bai Wei, Jinwan, this was too brazen. Jinwan had met a lot of rivals in love, but no matter which one of them was at least scheming. She had never met anyone who directly asked to have dinner with Mo Jingxin in front of her. Compared to the speechless expressions of the others, Mo Jingxin casually glanced at Ling Feifei, asking without emotion, if you have anything to say, just ask. Why do we need to eat? It's almost noon now. President Mo must be hungry. Anyway, it's time for lunch. Let's talk while eating. Ling Feifei smiled sweetly, as though she thought that her beauty could move the man before her. Although Jinwan and Bai Wei approached, Jinwan did not speak. Instead, she wore a slight smile on her face as she watched this scene. It was as though she wanted to watch Mo Jingxin's show. That's true. It's indeed almost noon. The school leaders suddenly interjected. CEO Mo, we've already arranged a place for lunch. The other school leaders and leaders from the city's education department will be coming. Why don't you join us for lunch? Hearing the school leader's interference, Ling Feifei could not pull a long face even if she wanted to. She thought for a moment and suddenly reached out to pull Jinwan over, saying, CEO, Mo, my roommate is also from High City. Although she's only the manager of a small studio in High City, she doesn't have many opportunities to meet you. However, she actually managed to meet you in T-City, which is thousands of miles away from High City. Isn't this a rare fate? CEO MO, give me some face. Let's go for lunch together. Jean Wan was about to push her away when she heard her next words, and her lips trembled. She subtly pushed Ling Feifei's hand away and turned her gaze to Mo Jingshan. The man looked at her meaningfully and asked with a light smile, "You're from High City?" Jean Wan, CEO Mo is asking you a question. Are you scared, silly? Hurry up and answer. Ling Feifei reached out to pull Jean Wan, but Jean Wan purposely kept her distance. When she reached out, she returned to Bai Wei's side. To avoid awkwardness, Ling Feifei smiled and turned to look at Mo Jingshan. CEO Mo, don't mind them. My roommates are all shy. Actually, they really want to have a chance to talk to you. Mo Jingshan held back a smile as he glanced at Jean Wan. When he withdrew his gaze, he did not look at Ling Feifei again. At the same time, the school leaders came over to say, CEO Mo, the leaders from the education department, and the principal are already preparing to head to the restaurant. Do you want to go with them? I'll be staying in T-City for a period of time. There's still plenty of time for me to eat with the school leaders. There's no rush, Mo Jingshan calmly said. Many years ago, when I was studying abroad, I've long heard about the university cafeterias in the country. Since it's already lunchtime, and since my classmates have invited me so warmly, why don't I follow you to T University's cafeteria for a walk and have lunch here? How about it? T University's cafeteria? Ling Feifei's dream of sitting with CEO Mo in a certain Western restaurant was instantly shattered. Bai Wei, who had not interjected all this while, finally spoke up. CEO Mo, if you really have such plans, T University's cafeteria is naturally the best choice. The chefs in T University's cafeteria are really skilled. It can be said that they are better than any other university's cafeteria in the country. Do you want to try it with us? The school leaders were about to collapse. What kind of god was Mo Jingshan? In the end, he refused to stay in the 7-star hotel that the school leaders had arranged for him. Right now, he didn't even want to go to the best restaurant the school had arranged for him. He actually wanted to squeeze into the cafeteria with a bunch of students. What kind of taste was this? Or was it some kind of hobby? However, Mo Jingshan had already personally spoken. The school leaders originally wanted to tactfully mention it again. In the end, under Bai Wei's polite invitation, Mo Jingshan lightly curved his lips. All right, students, please lead the way. Seeing that Mo Jingshan really wanted to go to the cafeteria, Ling Feifei had never eaten in a cafeteria ever since she came to T University. Even if the food was said to be good, she felt that the food in this type of cafeteria could not be too clean. The quality was also average, so she had never gone there. But now... Chapter 243. The school leaders were afraid of neglecting him and originally planned to follow Mo Jingshan. However, the moment they lifted their feet, they heard Mo Jingshan's words before he left. It's enough with these students leading the way. You guys should go do what you need to do. There's no need to come with us. Mo Jingshan did not plan on letting them follow him. The school leaders were not foolish. They could tell his intentions and did not follow him. After thinking about it carefully, they felt that the 3 female students wouldn't be able to stir up any trouble in front of Mo Jingshan. Even if the 3 female students had any unruly ideas, they wouldn't be able to hide from people like Mo Jingshan. They didn't need to worry too much about it. There were indeed many people in the cafeteria. Due to Mo Jingshan's sudden appearance, the students in the cafeteria were in an uproar. Although the school leaders did not dare to follow them, they still sent security guards to maintain order in the cafeteria. The students who were rushing toward them were all chided by the security guards to return to the cafeteria and queue up. Not a single one of them was allowed to walk around Mo Jingshan. After Mo Jingshan entered, he calmly scanned the surroundings and stood at the back of the crowd. Seeing that the great CEO Mo was actually queuing up in the cafeteria, the people in front took the initiative to give up their spots. Mo Jingshan thanked them but did not go over. He remained standing in his original spot. Right now, Jinwan and Bai Wei stood behind Ling Feifei, while Ling Feifei stood behind Mo Jingshan. Furthermore, she purposely stood very close to him. There were two people between Jinwan and Mo Jingshan. There were quite a number of people who wanted to give up their spots. Gradually, some of them were embarrassed to stand in front of Mo Jingshan. Seeing that Mo Jingshan did not move to the front, they all consciously moved to the back. The long queue gradually shortened until they became the center of the line. The people in front who were almost there did not pay much attention to the back. After all, there were several lines here. Some people did not give up their spots. Ling Feifei saw that these people were not aware of it and suddenly walked to the front, rudely chasing them to the back. When the people in front realized that CEO Mo was queuing with them, they rushed to the back of the line. Mo Jingshan's indifferent gaze swept past them. He spoke to the spoiled Ling Feifei in an unperturbed and emotionless voice. If you don't have the awareness to line up properly, you should at least learn not to decide for me whether to stand at the front or the back after I've already made my intentions clear. You don't have the right to chase away anyone who's queuing according to the rules. Ling Feifei, who had been proudly showing off to everyone that she was the closest to CEO Mo, was suddenly scolded by Mo Jingshan's expressionless and cold voice. She immediately bit her lips heavily, her brows showing a hint of unhappiness and stubbornness. CEO Mo, I'm only doing this so that you can quickly taste the canteen's food. Furthermore, your time is precious. Lining up is too much of a waste of time. That's why I want everyone to consciously give up their spots. Mo Jingshan coldly and indifferently said, Then you'd better learn to put away your self-righteous thoughts. Ling Feifei had initially thought that CEO Mo had a slight impression of her, which was why he had agreed to have a meal together. He had even lowered himself to come to T University's canteen. She did not expect that he would not give her any face. Ling Feifei felt extremely embarrassed. However, there were so many people watching. Furthermore, Mo Jingshan was the honorary principal. It was not too bad for a student to be lectured by a principal. She quickly suppressed her emotions and lowered her head to apologize. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful in the future. I won't act on my own. As she spoke, she consciously returned to the line. Bai Wei and Jinwan were very close. Jinwan heard Bai Wei use a voice that only she could hear to say, Serves you right. Although Ling Feifei indeed deserved it, Jinwan's attention was never on Ling Feifei. Ever since they left the stadium, she had been trying to find an opportunity to meet Mo Jingshan's gaze. She wanted to ask him if he was serious. Was he really going to T University's canteen? However, the man did not place his gaze on her again. She could not find an opportunity to meet his gaze. Now that there were two people between them, there was no chance for her to ask what exactly he was planning. Was he trying to make her heart, which was currently beating wildly, suffer a heart attack? After much difficulty, they finally managed to queue up to buy the canteen's set meal. Another student took the initiative to give up a clean table for them. After Mo Jingshan sat down, Ling Feifei rushed to sit by his side. However, Bai Wei took the seat first. Of course, she maintained an appropriate distance and did not cross the line. Ling Feifei was exasperated. She took the tray in her hands and sat across from Mo Jingshan. However, the moment she approached, she saw that Jinwan had already taken the seat across from him. Although she wanted to scold them and chase them away, Mo Jingshan was sitting right here. She had to maintain her image and could only endure. She put on an aggrieved expression and sat diagonally across from Mo Jingshan. There's no soup in today's set meal. Do you guys want to drink water? Bai Wei asked. All right, then go buy a few bottles of mineral water. CEO Mo spoke so much earlier. I'm sure he hasn't drunk any water yet, right? Ling Feifei opened her mouth. After speaking for so long, she only had Bai Wei buy it. She remained seated. Bai Wei narrowed her eyes at her. The canteen supermarket is just 10 meters behind you. I'll have to walk much further than you to go around such a long table. You only need to turn back and walk a few steps to buy it. Are you sure you want me to go? In any case, didn't Ling Feifei wish to pretend in front of CEO Mo? She could continue acting. She could not find an opportunity to order others around. Bai Wei would not spoil her. Ling Feifei turned back to glance in the direction of the supermarket. Jinwan, you go. I'm not thirsty. If you want a drink, go buy it yourself. Jinwan used her chopsticks to pick out the bones of a piece of fish. She patiently picked through it while calmly speaking without raising her eyelids. Ling Feifei immediately rolled her eyes at her. She placed down her chopsticks and stood up to head to the supermarket. CEO, M.O., we weren't too rude earlier in the stadium, were we? Seeing that the noisy Ling Feifei had left, Bai Wei politely asked. M.O. Jingshan glanced at the fishbone Jinwan was picking out and saw that she had also picked out a very small, thin, and hard-to-find bone. After making sure that she would not be stuck in her throat, he looked away and said indifferently, "No." Jinwan was stunned. The silence did not last more than 3 minutes before Ling Feifei returned with water. She had only bought 2 bottles. Clearly, one for her and one for M.O. Jingshan. When she sat down, she placed a bottle of water in front of him. She smiled sweetly and said, "CEO M.O., please have some water." At this moment, the fish Jinwan had just eaten was slightly salty. She immediately coughed. M.O. Jingshan expressionlessly pushed the bottle of mineral water that had not been placed down for more than 5 seconds in front of Jinwan. His thin lips only spat out 2 words, "You drink." Dash. Chapter 244. Jinwan's throat was indeed salty. She instinctively picked up the bottle, twisted it open, and drank a mouthful. Ling Feifei's expression immediately became longer. "CEO M.O., I bought this water for you. Earlier, my roommate said that she wasn't thirsty. There's no need for her to drink your water. Earlier was earlier. Now is now. Can't you see that Jinwan has been salted? Speaking of which, the fish is indeed a little salty today." Bai Wei glanced at Ling Feifei as she spoke. "Also, don't always call me your roommate. Do Jinwan and I not have names? I was afraid that COMO wouldn't be able to remember so many names in such a short amount of time, so I didn't say anything." Ling Feifei carelessly explained as she glanced at Jinwan in dissatisfaction. Seeing that Jinwan had no qualms about drinking the water, she became even more unhappy. "Thank you, CEOMO, for the water." After Jinwan finished drinking, she placed the bottle down and raised her eyes to speak to M.O. Jingshan. She then smiled as though there was no one else present. To others, this smile of hers was purely a smile of thanks. However, from M.O. Jingshan's perspective, this little woman was intentionally watching him make a scene, and now she was clearly seducing him. "No need to thank me." He also smiled slightly. His gaze was deep, appearing calm and indifferent. Seeing that Jinwan and M.O. Jingshan could speak to each other over a bottle of water, Ling Feifei felt even more upset. She suddenly regretted dragging Bai Wei and Jinwan along to look for M.O. Jingshan. Otherwise, the two of them would most likely never have the chance to sit and eat with someone like M.O. Jingshan in this lifetime. Furthermore, earlier on, she was the one who suggested to have a meal together. Right now, CEO M.O. had only come to a place like the cafeteria to give her face. If not for her, would Jinwan and Bai Wei have such an opportunity? However, although she was unhappy, M.O. Jingshan was seated diagonally across from her. Ling Feifei controlled herself and did not continue dwelling on this problem. She only said, "CEO M.O., why don't I go buy another bottle for you?" "No need." M.O. Jingshan also picked up the fish bones on his plate, calmly replying. His gaze was very light. T University's cafeteria would always be bustling with noise during lunch break. But today, because of M.O. Jingshan's presence, many of the students did not speak loudly or play around. After eating, they quietly filed out. It was rare for them to be so quiet. Ling Feifei had barely eaten anything. She truly felt that the food in the canteen was not very tasty. However, when she saw that M.O. Jingshan didn't seem to dislike her at all, and his table manners were calm and elegant. Such a lofty man actually had such a mundane side to him. The more she looked at him, the more charming he became. After taking a few bites, Ling Feifei could not help but mutter, "President Mo, don't blame me for being talkative, but you're really so handsome." After that, she continued to ask in a low voice, "Tho Mo, are you married?" Ahem. Jean Wan suddenly coughed. He coughed as if he was choking. He turned to the ground and coughed a few times, then picked up the bottle of mineral water again. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. Jean Wan avoided his eyes, held back her cough, and drank several mouthfuls of water. Ling Feifei was extremely displeased with Jean Wan's despicable actions of intentionally diverting Mo Jingshan's attention. "Jean Wan, why are you coughing out of the blue? Can't you see that he's talking? The fish is too salty." Jean Wan placed it in the water. "You're still eating salty fish? It's salted fish. If it's not salty, how can it be called salted fish?" Bai Wei said. Ling Feifei decided to ignore them. Her gaze stubbornly turned to Mo Jingshan. "CEO Mo, is it convenient for me to answer my earlier question?" Mo Jingshan's gaze was calm, gentle, and unhurried. "I'm married." Ling Feifei's anxious and expectant expression immediately collapsed. First, she did not expect him to actually be married. Secondly, she did not expect him to answer so directly. It's such a pity that CO Mo actually got married so early. What's there to pity about marriage? Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at her, his tone clear. "I'm very fortunate to be able to marry my current wife. After having her, my once unchanging life has changed because of her. In my eyes, she is the most important person. Once a person walks through the world, they must have a pair of hands that will never leave. Only then will they not truly be alone." Jean Wan's eating movements gradually slowed down. She raised her eyes to look at the man sitting opposite her, only to see that his eyes were filled with a hint of warmth that she often saw. She actually did not know that when Mo Jingshan mentioned her in front of outsiders, he would actually be like this. "It seems like CEO Mo really loves your wife. I'm so envious." Ling Feifei forced a smile. All of a sudden, she really wanted to know what kind of woman a man like Mo Jingshan would treat so attentively was like. Hearing the word "really loves," Jean Wan's grip on her chopsticks tightened. In an instant, her heart seemed to be filled with boiling emotions. If she had not maintained her composure, she would have directly pounced into this man's embrace. Unfortunately, at this moment, a male student from Professor Lin's class walked into the cafeteria and bought a bottle of water. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly spotted Jean Wan and smiled at her, revealing his white teeth. "Jean Wan, I was wondering why I couldn't find you anywhere. Why did you suddenly run to the cafeteria to eat?" After all, Jean Wan had good looks and was usually quiet and low-key. Many of the hedonistic young masters in Professor Lin's class had good impressions of Jean Wan. When they walked past each other in T University, those cold and arrogant fellows would always greet Jean Wan amiably. Today was not an exception. However, from Mo Jingshan's perspective, that was not the case. Jean Wan smiled and turned back to greet him. When she turned back, she met the man's mild gaze. Several minutes later, Jean Wan rose to head to the restroom. T University's cafeteria's restroom was very clean and quiet. Every half an hour, a cleaning lady would come to clean it. Although there were many students entering and leaving, it was still very clean. At this moment, many students had already left the cafeteria. Jean Wan walked into the female restroom and turned on the tap to let out the water. She leisurely rubbed her hands. After washing up, she had just turned off the water when a white figure suddenly flashed in. She turned back and saw Mo Jingshan. "This is the female." Jean Wan was about to speak when she saw him close the restroom door. Jean Wan's hands were still wet. She was startled for a moment before hurriedly placing her hands under the air dryer to dry them. As the wind whistled, the man's long lashes lowered. He looked at her and took 2 steps forward. What happened to the man earlier? Chapter 245. This was the female restroom. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no one outside, he actually came in as he pleased and kissed her as he pleased. However, it was undeniable that no matter how cold and aloof Mo Jingshan appeared in front of outsiders, when he lost control of his emotions. Only she could see it. Thinking of this, Jinwan's heart was filled with happiness. After being kissed and bitten, Jinwan was still smiling. The man pinched her chin. "You're still quite happy." Jinwan feigned ignorance. "What?" The man's emotions were unreadable as he watched her calm expression. "As expected, I shouldn't have let you come to T University from the start. This really wasn't a wise choice. Don't misunderstand. He's just a classmate. Normally, we'll see each other all the time. When we see each other, we should at least greet each other. Is that so? Why didn't he greet your other two classmates?" "Perhaps I'm better looking." Jinwan spoke the truth. In any case, she could not lie in front of Mo Jingshin. Any lies would be useless in front of him. It was rare for the little woman to be so narcissistic. Mo Jingshin coldly scolded, "Very proud of yourself." "How am I proud of myself? Earlier on, I was almost moved by you. I had to force myself not to speak. Right now, can't you feel my excitement and my expression that's as warm as a spring breeze?" Jinwan leaned into his embrace. Since the restroom door was already closed, she should act coquettishly when it was time to act coquettishly. Otherwise, if Boss Missouri turned into a jealous king or something, things would not end well. The little woman's soft and fragrant body was pressed into his embrace. The man glanced at her with a hint of a smile. "Is that so? Then can you feel my killing intent?" All of a sudden, there was a knock on the restroom door. Jinwan's expression turned solemn. She turned toward the door and saw that it had been locked from the inside. Why can't this door be opened?" A female student spoke from outside. "Perhaps it's broken again? Last week, the cafeteria restroom's lock seemed to have been broken. The school said that they had already found someone to fix it. Perhaps it's broken again? Forget it. Let's go to the school's restroom." The two female students pushed against the door, but could not open it. In the end, they left. Jinwan had just released a sigh of relief when a hand behind her waist suddenly lifted her up. Before she could react, the man abruptly kissed her again. The long and deep kiss made her soften instantly. He pressed the back of her head with one hand and held her slender waist with the other, bringing her forward. This kind of occasion, this kind of place, everything about this man made her want to hold him tightly in her world, not to be taken away by anyone, not to be shared with anyone. She instinctively stuck out her tongue to make a tentative response. The man paused, his eyes darkened inch by inch, and he mercilessly bit the tip of her tongue. The sweetness was stronger than the pain. Jinwan raised her hands to hug the man's neck. In an instant, she was lifted up by him, placed on the sink, and kissed. When her breathing quickened, he saw the little woman's flushed neck and ears in the mirror behind her. Mo Jingshin's hands were placed on the edge of the sink, encircling her between him and the mirror. He bent down to look at her, his black eyes filled with undisguised aggression. "There's still more than a month before you graduate. It seems like I can't leave T City in the short term," he said slowly and huskily. "Keep those people who are seeking death away from you." And when Jinwan was carried up, her clothes were slightly messy. The little woman was not dressed in the mature professional attire she wore in High City Studio. Jinwan was only 21 years old. Her eyes were big and her skin was white. This simple and clean student attire made her appear like a high school student who had yet to reach adulthood. Right now, she was sitting in front of him. Her gaze was clean and innocent. Her slightly messy collar was slightly pulled open, revealing her collarbone. The softness hidden under her clothes rose and fell with her breathing. In an instant, he kissed her, and her red, translucent lips were exceptionally seductive. Seeing her like this, Mo Jingshin's lower body began to heat up. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he suppressed the desire to press her down here and do it properly. He calmed his breathing and slowly asked, "Must we maintain such a distance and relationship in T University?" "It's not necessary. It doesn't have to be like this. But as you can see, the students here all worship you. There are many girls like Ling Fei Fei. I still have to study here for more than a month. I don't want to be disturbed by them. In the past, I was always targeted by those rich young ladies in High City. It's not easy for me to live such a low-key and peaceful life. Anyway, I don't have much time left. Just cooperate with me. Jinwan raised her arms and hugged the man's neck tightly. You have to know how much weight the words Mo Jingshan's wife carry. I'll instantly become the target of public criticism. With me around, will you be afraid? Of course I won't be afraid. But I've seen too many envious, jealous, and hateful gazes since I was young. Right now, I'll just treat it as Mrs. Mo visiting T University incognito. Mr. Mo, you have to give me some face and let me play to my heart's content. Jinwan leaned in and kissed his lips. When the man lowered his eyes to look at her, she said with some pride, You can't always spend your time on me in T-City. There's still a MO Corporation subsidiary company here. If there's a need, the company's management needs you to meet them. Furthermore, don't you think that if we directly publicize our relationship, it'll be too much to abuse the dogs? Mo Jingshan snorted. Your Professor Lin isn't hidden. Professor Lin doesn't matter. He's an old man with high IQ. He knows what to say and what not to say. As for the other school leaders and students, forget it. What's wrong with that roommate of yours? Mo Jingshan carried Jinwan down from the slightly wet and cold sink. Men usually did not pay much attention to the small squabbles between women. However, earlier on, Ling Feifei had been arguing with Jinwan and the others. It was clear that their relationship did not seem like that of normal roommates. She's the one who called to find trouble with me that night. She's only 20 years old, but she behaves like an immature child. She's likely been spoiled by her family. I don't usually bicker with her. You can just ignore her. Does she always target you? Not really. It's just that she feels that I'm the manager of a small studio. She feels it's unfair that I'm living in the same dormitory as her, who's as beautiful as a flower. So she always wants to bully me. The man raised his brows. It's rare to find someone who has the instinct to bully you. Jinwan. Chapter 246. The man watched her for a moment before leaning down to press his lips against hers. He used a hoarse and alluring voice to say, Only I can bully you. Jinwan, what kind of big truth was he spouting? If she was bullied, wasn't she bullied on the bed? Jinwan's phone rang. Bai Wei was calling to rush her. Why aren't you back yet after going to the bathroom for so long? Professor Lin's class is at 1. It's already 12:45. I'll be right there. Jinwan hung up after speaking. Originally, she wanted to leave. However, being held in the man's embrace, Jinwan raised her head to kiss his chin. Hubby, you were especially handsome on stage today. Jinwan smiled brightly. You were different from your usual handsomeness. Today, in front of a group of young and energetic students, your entire body seemed to be glowing. Mo Jingshan had never heard Jinwan describe him in such a straightforward manner. His gaze faltered slightly as he looked at her. In this world, I'm afraid there isn't a man more suited to wear a shirt than you. Jinwan kissed his chin again. When you stood there and spoke, it really made one want to tear apart your shirt and pounce on you. The man's handsome brows rose slightly. His gaze was deep as he slowly said, I'll give you this chance tonight. Jinwan did have the intention to take the initiative to seduce him. Who asked him to praise his wife in front of others? He was so charming. However, the man's words caused her to immediately break down. Her face was burning as she escaped from his embrace and headed out to open the door. The moment she opened the door, she saw Ling Feifei, who had appeared out of nowhere, staring at Jinwan with an unhappy expression. She seemed to want to peer into the bathroom behind Jinwan. Is CEO Mo here? Ling Feifei's senses were sharp as she glared at her. Jinwan walked out, slowly closing the bathroom door behind her. No, no. Ling Feifei stepped forward. Earlier, I saw him head this way when he left. This isn't the cafeteria's exit. How could he not be here? Jinwan calmly replied. Earlier, he seemed to have passed by here. However, he definitely had to leave after using the bathroom. Could it be that he's staying here to eat? In the bathroom, Mo Jingshan, she thought that Feng Ling would be back after resting for a few days, but when Jinwan called to ask, Feng Ling hoarsely said that she might need to rest for a few more days. Jinwan was worried and directly went to Feng Ling's residence. After knocking for a long time, the door was finally opened. The moment she opened the door, Jinwan's eyelids twitched. This was the first time she had seen Feng Ling look so haggard and out of sorts. She then noticed that her short hair was slightly messy and hesitated before entering. "What's wrong? Are your injuries any better? Are you sick again, or—" "I'm fine. Why are you here?" Feng Ling turned around, avoiding Jin Wan's gaze. However, when Feng Ling turned around, Jin Wan saw that there seemed to be two particularly obvious red marks on Feng Ling's neck. Jin Wan immediately walked over and pulled Feng Ling back. Only then did she see the marks on her neck more clearly. Not only on her neck, but her collar was also slightly pulled open by Jin Wan. Around Feng Ling's collarbone, there were scattered marks. Jin Wan naturally recognized these marks. Every time Mo Jingshun lost control in bed and was especially forceful, she would wake up to find such marks on her body. However, Mo Jingshun usually cared about her feelings, so this was rare. Even if there were some marks, there wouldn't be too many. But Feng Ling's, it could be described as having suffered some kind of serious sexual assault. What happened? Jin Wan held her hand to prevent her from turning away. Seeing that Feng Ling's complexion was also very bad, she immediately pushed her to sit on the sofa and looked at her coldly and sternly. "Haven't you been recuperating at home these days? Who is it?" The answer clearly appeared in her mind, but Jin Wan felt that although Nan Heng's background was complicated, he was extremely calm and rational like Mo Jingshun. It shouldn't be possible for him. The answer was obvious in Jin Wan's eyes. Feng Ling looked in her eyes and did not speak or explain. It really was Nan Heng. Jin Wan raised her hand in disbelief to tug at Feng Ling's clothes, but Feng Ling gently pulled her away. "Don't look," she said hoarsely. "When did this happen? Yesterday? Last night? And it was during the day? What exactly did he want to do? He clearly knows that you're injured, yet he still treats you like this? Is he a beast?" Jin Wan was so angry that she almost cursed. She forced herself to control herself to avoid agitating Feng Ling, who appeared to be in a bad condition. Feng Ling did not answer. After a moment of silence, she said, "I asked for it. It was my words that agitated him. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come to this. I overestimated the way we interact. I can only blame myself. What exactly happened? Regardless of the relationship between the two of you, he can't treat you like this. What does this mean?" Jin Wan pointed at the marks on Feng Ling's neck that appeared to have been bitten. They were not simple hickeys. This is called abuse. Abuse, do you understand? This is too much. She saw that Feng Ling's complexion was really bad. Furthermore, it seemed like she had just been bullied not too long ago. The room seemed to still be filled with the faint smell of tobacco from before the man left. Jin Wan stood up to open the windows. She suddenly caught a glimpse of the bedroom door. She abruptly walked over and saw the mess on the floor. Feng Ling's clothes were torn and scattered. Almost none of her clothes were intact. They were all thrown on the floor. Jin Wan pursed her lips. She turned to see Feng Ling standing up from the sofa. She seemed to be pouring a glass of water for Jin Wan. She saw that Feng Ling's walking posture was slightly awkward. It was clear that she was in excruciating pain. "You don't need to pour water. I won't drink," Jin Wan said calmly. Jin Wan calmly said, "Feng Ling, Mr. Mo and I are your real employers now. No matter what kind of relationship you had with Nan Heng, or what kind of entanglement you had, I don't care. But you're my woman. I can't just watch as my woman is bullied like this." Feng Ling still poured the water and placed the glass down. She then stood by the sofa and raised her eyes to look at Jin Wan. It seemed like she wanted to say something, but her lips moved and she chose to close her mouth. "What do you want to say?" Jin Wan saw that Feng Ling's condition was really bad. Her intuition told her that she wanted her help. Feng Ling's lips moved again. After a long time, she forced out a few hoarse words. "Mrs. Mo, can I trouble you to buy a box of birth control pills for me? Dash." Chapter 247. This was the first time Jin Wan had bought a contraceptive pill. When she stood in the pharmacy, she didn't know what brand to buy. It wasn't until the pharmacy clerk brought her a pink box with only one pill in it that she took a closer look at it. Then her eyes glanced at the medicine counter next to her. "Miss, do you need anything else? Do you have pregnancy test?" Yes, please wait a moment. I'll get it for you. When Jinwan left the pharmacy, she held the contraceptive pills she bought for Feng Ling in one hand and the pregnancy test paper she bought for herself in the other. Although she didn't seem to be pregnant previously, she occasionally showed signs of early pregnancy. However, due to her cold body, she didn't consider whether she would get pregnant soon. Cold body was related to the cold womb. Although it didn't have much effect, the pregnancy rate would definitely be lower. Therefore, Jinwan didn't take the possibility of pregnancy seriously. Since she came to the pharmacy today, she bought a pregnancy test and went back to take it. Returning to Feng Ling's residence, Feng Ling had already showered and changed her clothes. Except for the obvious marks on her neck that couldn't be covered, she looked no different. Do you want to move to my place these days? Jinwan handed the medicine to her. She originally wanted to go into the bedroom to help her put away the clothes on the floor, but when she entered, she saw that the floor and bed had been cleaned. Although Feng Ling was used to living with those men, she really liked cleanliness. Today was the first time she saw such a scene. No, you and CEO Mo haven't been together for more than a month. You'd better enjoy your rare time alone. I'm fine here. I'll go back to school to accompany you after a few days of rest. I don't need to accompany you, but you can't stay here alone. What if Nanheng? He just flew to America. He won't come for the time being. Feng Ling's expression was calm. Jinwan slowly frowned. Flew to America? He just bullied you like this, and in the blink of an eye, he'll fly back to America? Mrs. Mo, I don't want Mr. Mo to know about this matter. Otherwise, he might fire me because my matter has affected your mood. I don't plan to return to America, so Feng Ling didn't explain, but slightly pursed her lips. Rest well. I won't tell him. Jinwan didn't hesitate at all. Only then did Feng Ling stop talking. She smiled at her, but clearly she was not in the mood to smile. It could be seen that there must be a story between Feng Ling and Nanheng, but Feng Ling did not like to share too much about herself with others. Previously, in the condo, Feng Ling was able to talk about some of her past experiences, which could be considered as letting down some of her guard against Jinwan, this employer or friend whom she was increasingly familiar with. However, she clearly did not intend to talk too much about her relationship with Nanheng. Or perhaps there was something that was too obscure to mention. Jinwan stayed at Feng Ling's place until 7 in the evening before leaving. In the end, she helped Feng Ling apply ice to the bruises on her neck and reminded her to apply ice every hour. After confirming that Feng Ling's mood and condition were stable, she finally left. At night, when Mo Jingshun entered the house, Jinwan had just returned home. When he returned, Jinwan was sitting on the sofa with a pillow in her hand. She was curled up into a ball and covered her eyes with her fingers, leaving only a small gap to look at the television screen. The man approached, his hand landing on her head. The little woman on the sofa immediately shivered. She let out an ah and abruptly raised her head to look at him. The fear in her eyes gradually dissipated. Why did you come back so late? What are you watching? Mo Jingshin rubbed the top of her head comfortingly, glancing at the television screen from the side. The television was currently showing a horror film that had recently been released. When I reached home earlier, I realized that you weren't back yet. Recently, I've gotten used to staying in the dormitory. When I was bored, I randomly watched a movie. It just so happened that they were showing a horror film, so I watched it for a while. With that little bit of courage of yours, when did you become interested in horror films? In the past, I always heard others say that it was good, but I never had the chance to watch it. Just now, when the channel changed, I saw it, so I took a few more glances. Jinwan was still hugging the pillow, her face pressed against it. She tilted her head to look at him. You're indeed busier in T-City than in High City. And I'll be staying in T-City for at least half a month. I'll try to finish my work in the morning and come back earlier to accompany you at night. And, seeing that the little woman seemed to have been badly frightened, Mo Jingshin picked up the remote control to turn off the television. He then carried her up, sat on the sofa, and placed her on his lap. If you're not coming back, it's fine if I stay in the dormitory. After all, I've already stayed there for more than a month. I'm already used to it. Your roommate has a very serious brain problem and psychological disorder. It's best if you don't stay there as often. Jinwon almost laughed out loud. A very serious brain problem and psychological disorder? Was he indirectly implying that Ling Feifei was a retard? Her eyes curved. Humans, will always encounter all kinds of weirdos. This kind of person with a low IQ doesn't pose any threat to me at all. What's there to worry about? It's true that she doesn't pose any threat, but it'll easily lower her IQ. After speaking, Mo Jingshun watched her for a moment before pinching her cheek. I'll accompany you in T-City for a few more days. After that, when I return to High City, I'll be busy with some overseas cooperation projects. I might have to travel frequently. Jinwon raised her face, blinking. Have you gotten any new female secretaries by your side recently? The man pursed his lips. What? Are you afraid that an unknown love rival will appear when I'm not by your side? The room was warm. Jinwon wore soft home clothes. Her hair was tied into a bun, and her sleeves were rolled up, revealing her fair wrists. She did not wear any unnecessary jewelry. She pursed her lips, hugging the man's neck and pulling him down, forcing him to lower his head to press closer to her. She leaned close to his ear to say, "You're the only one who's dissatisfied with the male students who greet me in school, but I'm not allowed to investigate the enemies around you." In the past, Jinwon did not mind the gender of the employees in Mo Jingshun's company or around him. However, ever since the incident with Shuyan, she had always minded the position of his secretary. The man's hand was around her waist. Using this position, he leaned down and kissed her twice on the lips. He chuckled softly. My secretary position is still empty. Mrs. Mo is really worried. Why don't you wait until you've completed your studies in business management, hand over the studio to your best friend, and you can come to work in Mo Corporation. Then Xiatian will most likely use the reason of valuing love over friendship to cut ties with me for a few days. Chapter 248. After a while, when Jinwon was about to leave his embrace, the man's low and indifferent voice suddenly rang from above her head. What's that? Jinwon raised her eyes to meet Mo Jingshun's gaze. She then turned to look at the trash can by the sofa. There was a pink package of pregnancy test paper. It was a very small thing. Earlier, when she threw it away, she had deliberately hidden it. Alas, he still saw it. Previously, my appetite wasn't good. I was always nauseous and dizzy. Later, my appetite suddenly improved. I can eat and sleep well. Today, when I passed by the pharmacy, I bought a pregnancy test paper to see if I'm pregnant. After the test, I found that I'm not. It should be because I'm not used to the climate in T-City. Jinwon leaned into the man's embrace. It seems like grandfather's dream of holding a great-grandchild will have to wait. Mo Jingshun glanced at her expression and casually took out the pregnancy test paper from the trash can. He lowered his head to read the instructions and related information on it. After reading it, he directly carried Jinwon up from the sofa. What are you doing? Jinwon was suddenly placed on the ground. Her legs landed on the ground, and she stood steadily. Go to the hospital for a check, he said. The accuracy of this test at home is only 50 to 90%. It's better to go to the hospital for a check to be sure. There's no need. I haven't been that sleepy these days, and I don't feel much nausea. I don't think I'm pregnant. Besides, it's already so late. The hospital only has emergency rooms. The gynecologists and obstetricians aren't around. Even if we go, there won't be a detailed examination. It's already so late, and even the blood test doctor isn't around. Mo Jingshun did not plan to be careless with Jinwon's pregnancy. She could tell. She smiled and stood on her tiptoes before him. She held the man's handsome face and kissed him heavily. I'll definitely take good care of my body. The moment there are any signs of pregnancy, I'll obediently go to the hospital. Mo Jingshun glanced at the pregnancy test paper again. Jinwon decided to show him the test result with only a red line that she had taken with her phone. In the end, Mo Jingshun glanced at the time and did not say anything more. He turned into the kitchen to help her boil brown sugar water. After Jinwon came to T-City without Annie Chen's supervision, It had been a long time since she drank hot water or brown sugar water at night. Seeing that Mo Jingshin was in the kitchen, Jinwan tidied up the paper basket and turned on the television to find something good to watch. Horror movies were better left alone. After changing a few channels, his phone rang. She took a look. The caller was the secretary-manager of the G Corporation, the most capable secretary of her father, Ji Hongwon. After Jinwan came to T-City, she hadn't contacted her family much, and her father hadn't called for a long time. Why would his secretary suddenly call? She picked it up. Hello. After a few seconds of silence, a familiar voice came from the other side of the phone. It was polite and formal. Hello, Miss G. I'm Secretary Zhou. The other party continued. Director G recently made an appointment with a few old friends to go to T-City for sightseeing. Since Miss G is in T-City, he asked me to arrange a time to meet you. Director G hasn't seen you in a while. May I know when Miss G will be free next week? My dad is coming to T-City. Why didn't he call me personally? Jinwan spoke unhurriedly. I've never heard of him being close to any of his old friends in T-City before. Now that he's here in T-City for sightseeing in this season, what's so interesting about the cold wind and fallen leaves on the ground? Director G just went to a meeting. Before the meeting, he made this decision with several partners and friends, and then asked me to arrange everything in T-City as soon as possible. I called Miss G as soon as possible. After all, Director G agreed to go to T-City because you're there. This father misses his daughter, but is unwilling to say it out loud, so I can only try my best to make the arrangements. Secretary Zhou smiled warmly and said, Chairman G has also discussed a few new collaborations in T-City and invited a few old friends from nearby. Secretary Zhou had worked for Ji Hongwon for many years. This year, he was about 34 or 35 years old. He had always been capable and could be regarded as one of her father's capable assistants. However, Secretary Zhou didn't have much contact with Jinwan and only nodded at her face when they met a few times. However, he did know that Secretary Zhou had worked for the G Corporation for many years. All right, I understand. Thank you, Secretary Zhou. I'll tell you the specific time after I decide. After hanging up the phone, Jinwan sat on the sofa and stared at the ground in a daze. She didn't know if her father finally dealt with the incident with Shun Haru. She understood him, so she didn't rush him. However, Shun Haru's existence was definitely a considerable threat to the G family. Now that her father suddenly wanted to come to T-City, perhaps she could take the opportunity to have a good talk with him. Several minutes later, Jinwan's phone beeped with a text message. She subconsciously turned to look at it. It was from Secretary Zhou's number. There was only a simple sentence. Next Wednesday, CEO G will be at T-City's exclusive club. If Miss G has enough time, you can go there at that time. Jinwan glanced at it and replied, All right. She was about to call Ji Hongwon and ask him when he would come to T-City. She could pick him up at the airport in advance. However, Secretary Zhou said that Director G had just left for a meeting and her father was usually very busy in the company. Jinwan was thinking about it when Mo Jingshen brought out the brown sugar water he had prepared for her. Test the temperature. Drink it when it's not hot. Mo Jingshen placed the glass in front of her eyes. Jinwan picked it up and took a sip. Mo Jingshen had most likely placed it by the window to dry for her. It was no longer particularly hot. She drank some and was about to put it down when the man glanced at her. Drink it all. Jinwan could only raise the glass and finish it in one gulp. This brown sugar water had some ginger in it. After drinking it, Jinwan went to take a shower. It had already been an hour, but she could still feel the warmth in her stomach. She was about to close the window before going to bed when the man reached out and pulled her back. He carried her back to the bed. In the future, don't let the wind blow in before going to bed. I'll close it. Every time Mo Jingshan was by her side, he took good care of her. When he laid down, Jinwan leaned against his chest. She played with the man's hand as she said, Your brown sugar water skills are even better than Annie Chen's. Even if you're only self-sufficient during your time in America, you can't possibly know how to do this. You didn't specially learn it, did you? Chapter 249. The bedside lamp fell. The light was dim, but Jean could still see the man's face clearly. She played with his palm, her fingers poking around his palm. "This is the first time I've heard you talk about your mother. What kind of person is she? To be able to live with Director M.O. for a lifetime and obtain grandfather's love, she must be a woman with a high EQ, right?" M.O. Jingshen raised his brows, holding back a smile. "Aren't you the one grandfather likes the most? That time, I heard grandfather talk about your mother. From his tone, he seemed to admire and like her a lot. I've never interacted with her before. Earlier, I heard you say that she likes to study health, so I asked out of curiosity." Jean placed her fingers between his. Their palms were pressed together, and their fingers intertwined. She raised her eyes to look at him. The man's expression was calm. Without hesitation, he said, "She is indeed a good mother, but I've been away from America for too long, and the time I spent by her side was short. After I grew up, I didn't interact much with her." "Then will she like me?" "Yes." M.O. Jingshin rubbed her hair. "My mother's personality is very open-minded. If she wasn't, she wouldn't have tolerated my father for so many years." As M.O. Jingshin spoke, he covered the two of them with a blanket. "How much I care about you is how much she likes you. Don't think too much. Go to sleep." Jean raised her chin, asking proudly, "You care about me a lot." "And I care." The smile on Jean lips deepened. She leaned closer into his embrace. Under the bedside lamp, her eyes were clear. "Then what you like the most about me?" M.O. Jingshin's hand paused on her hand. He looked at her fair and clean face. His hand brushed past it, causing a strand of her hair to flutter. "Thinking of ways to make me praise you. Aren't you embarrassed in the middle of the night?" M.O. Jingshin chuckled, kissing her on the lips. "Are you still not satisfied after tasting the sweetness I gave you in front of your roommates that day?" Jean immediately arched into his embrace. "I've never heard you praise me before. Can I hear you now?" He looked at her coquettishly, rubbing against his chest as she spoke, and leaned down to kiss her. "Maybe I'm destined to fall in your hands in this life. My heart softens when I see you coquettishly." "Oh, then it seemed like she really should act coquettishly in the future. If it weren't for the fact that absence made the heart grow fonder, and if it weren't for the fact that they had just gotten back together, she wouldn't act coquettishly like this." In the end, he touched her face and smiled faintly. "Probably because I want to kiss you whenever I see you, no matter when or where." Ji-In glared at him. "Haven't you kissed enough?" "Yes, quite a lot, but not enough," the man said, and kissed her lips again. Jean returned the kiss, panting heavily before she hurriedly called for a stop. "I really have a test tomorrow, and I can't easily stop this kind of test. I need to conserve my energy. Let me sleep early." "All right." Jean had been leaning against his chest since she fell asleep. She was quiet and warm. M.O. Jingshin looked at the little woman in his arms. His fingers caressed her hair and landed on her ears, gently caressing them. What did he like about her? Back then, Qin's sighting had said that the moment he saw Shi Niange, he knew that he would most likely be entangled with this woman until death. M.O. Jingshin's feelings for Jean were most likely not as simple as until death. Ever since that night many years ago, when he was dragged ashore by this teenage girl in the Los Angeles River, and when this young girl performed CPR on him in the dark, he was destined to be entangled with her for the rest of his life. At that time, when he was unconscious, he heard her softly muttering while performing CPR, "Don't die, ah. This is the first time I've done something good in my life, and also the first time I performed CPR. Look, I've even given you my first kiss. Please don't die, come back to life." At that time, he really could not open his mouth to speak. Otherwise, he would have definitely told her, "Little friend, CPR is not as simple as blowing air inwards, and a first kiss is not as simple as this." 3 days later, T University. The results of the test were out. As expected, hard work pays off. Jean results were first in Professor Lin's class. Ever since she was young, she had always obtained straight A's in every subject. Even though she was not very serious when she was studying in America, she was still blessed by the heavens when it came to absorbing knowledge. As long as she put in a little more effort, she would be able to memorize better than others and comprehend more thoroughly. Thus, Things like tests usually did not pose a problem for her. Just as she was about to head to the school building, Ling Feifei suddenly called out to her from behind. Jinwan, you haven't returned to the dormitory for the past few days. Don't tell me you have a man outside of school. Jinwan did not even turn back. She calmly replied, We're not underage children. Don't bother about whether I have a man or not. Even if I do, how is it bothering you? Ling Feifei rolled her eyes. Don't think I can't tell. The last time CEO Mo was around, you kept trying to find an opportunity to speak to him. Later on, in the restroom, you must have found an opportunity to meet CEO Mo alone. Do you think that just because you're from High City, you can really speak to him? Why don't you take a good look at yourself in the mirror? Do you think you're worthy of him? In this world, it's not easy for the mentally handicapped to survive. You haven't even clearly seen your own nature, yet you've already handed a mirror to someone else. Are you afraid that your own face is too ugly and will scare yourself? Or are you only capable of seeing others? Have you already reached a state of madness where you forget yourself? Ling Feifei, this is an illness. You have to be treated. Jin Wan chuckled. She ignored Ling Feifei's choked expression and entered the school building unconcernedly. Ling Feifei stood in the same spot, angrily glaring at Jin Wan's back. It was as though she could not wait to use her gaze to pierce a hole through Jin Wan's body. She then picked up her phone to look at the message she had just received. Feifei, this morning, I saw the Jin Wan who used to stay in your dormitory. She actually alighted from CEO Mo's car. Your roommates. You definitely know the inside story. Hurry and tell me. Could it be that Jin Wan has hugged on his CEO Mo's thigh? Ling Feifei once again read the message word by word. Finally, she raised her eyes to look at Jin Wan's direction, but she had already entered. Jin Wan had always maintained her composure. She had always kept everything under wraps and never revealed too much about herself. Could it be that she had secretly taken advantage of her? CEO Mo had already said that he was married. If Jin Wan was bold enough to interfere in someone else's marriage and seduce Mo Jingxin, then she, Ling Feifei, could not blame her for catching hold of her weakness. Dash. Chapter 250. Wednesday. Jin Wan got out of the taxi and walked to the door of the luxurious Premium U clubhouse. Before she came, she called Ji Hong-won, but he didn't answer. Then she called Secretary Zhou, who said that Chairman Ji's cell phone was in his coat pocket and he was playing cards and drinking with several old friends. When Jin Wan arrived, she saw that the location of the clubhouse was quite good. Although her father was not a particularly low-key person, he usually chose relatively quiet-themed clubhouses or antique restaurants that looked very grand. This was the first time he chose such a young place. However, there were too many rich people here, and this was one of the largest clubhouses in T-City. If her father wanted to come here to talk about cooperation or to meet old friends, he had no better place to go, so he chose this place. It was not impossible. When Jin Wan arrived, it was already past 7 o'clock in the evening. The clubhouse was not completely lively, and only a few people were walking in. Seeing the waiters standing inside, she was about to ask where room 18 was, but before she could ask, a hand suddenly reached out and held her arm. She turned her eyes sharply, only to see that it was a man in his 30s, dressed in a professional suit. Are you Miss Ji? Jin Wan looked at him warily. You are. The man smiled politely. I was sent by Chairman Ji to pick you up. Chairman Ji is waiting for you in the private room. Just follow me. From the beginning, the person who contacted Jin Wan was not her father. Even if Secretary Zhou was trustworthy, he was not as trustworthy as her father. Now the person who came to pick her up was a stranger. Jin Wan raised her eyebrows. Are you sent by Chairman Ji? Did he bring a new assistant to T-City or something? Where is Secretary Zhou? Her father was not such an unreliable person. Jin Wan became more and more vigilant. The man smiled politely and said in a calm tone, Chairman Ji drank too much. Secretary Zhou is watching him in the private room. I'm Chairman Ji's new assistant. Miss Ji, even if you don't believe me, you should trust Secretary Zhou. She has been in the Ji Corporation for so many years. You can't not trust her. Besides, it's the first time I've met you, and I have no motive to hurt you. Are you worried? Jinwon didn't speak and looked at the bathroom not far away. Okay, I came here in a hurry. Can I go to the bathroom to put on lipstick? Do you need to touch up your makeup to see your father? Of course. My father's old friend is here, isn't he? It's the most basic etiquette to touch up your makeup. The man nodded to her. Okay, of course. Jinwon walked quickly into the bathroom with her cell phone in hand and called Mo Jingshan as soon as she entered. The call was quickly picked up. She knew that he was having a meeting at the subsidiary company. Last night, he had said that he had to make a last-minute decision on a project at the subsidiary company tonight. Jinwon rarely called him when she knew he was in a meeting. So, Mo Jingshan picked up the phone. What's up? The man's low voice came from the phone. Jinwon didn't want the man outside to hear, so she lowered her voice. I'm in the exclusive U club. My father's secretary asked me to come here, but I haven't seen my father yet. For now, I'm not sure if there's anything else, but if I don't pick up when you call me 20 minutes later, then there's really something wrong. Before Mo Jingshan could speak again, the man outside had come to the door of the bathroom. Jinwon suddenly put down the phone, hung up the phone, took out a lipstick, and casually applied it. She turned to the man waiting outside the door and said, "Let's go. Please lead the way." They took the elevator to the floor of private room 18. The man took her to the innermost private room. When they reached the door, he opened the door and motioned for Jinwon to go in. Although it looked like a private room, there was no sound inside. Jinwon stood at the door and didn't go in. Isn't my father drinking with a few friends? Is Secretary Zhou also inside? Why is there no sound? Chairman Ji is in the next private room. He misses you, Miss Ji, but he knows you don't like this kind of drinking and social occasions. If you go there, you will inevitably be persuaded to drink a few glasses of wine. So he asked you to wait for him here. Miss Ji, don't worry. I'll ask Secretary Zhou when Chairman Ji can come. Jinwon felt it was very interesting. Although Secretary Zhou had worked for the G Corporation for many years, it seemed that he was not very reliable. She took a step back and moved away from the door. She could hear someone singing next door and the sound of glasses clinking against each other. It's fine. My dad has never allowed me to drink since I was young. Many people know that, so it's fine even if I go in. The man hesitated and said, "All right." He turned to go next door, opened the door, and said, "Miss Ji, please." Jinwon walked in, but as soon as she entered the door, she saw that there was no one inside at all. There was only a large color screen TV, dozens of inches on the wall, showing a cocktail party and karaoke. She turned around abruptly, but the door behind her had closed with a bang. She picked up her cell phone and looked at it. Sure enough, there was no signal in the private room. Whether it was the room next door or this room, the other party knew her too well and specially designed it for her. She was alone in this private room. The lights were bright, the coffee table and sofa were clean, and there was not a bottle of wine. But there was only a cup of steaming tea in the middle of the coffee table, which meant that the person who had been sitting here had just left. Jinwon didn't reach out to touch it. She looked around again, turned to the window, and looked out. Although this floor was not particularly high, there was no help outside, so there was no way to get out of here. Secretary Zhou had been with her father for so many years, and he would not easily be swayed. Who on earth had the ability to bribe Secretary Zhou? Suddenly, sleepiness came over her. Jinwon couldn't help yawning, and her head became heavier and heavier. Because she didn't sit down, she immediately shook her head hard because of the weightlessness and woke up from her sleepiness. But her brain was a little muddled. She subconsciously took out her cell phone and looked at the time. She had only been here for 5 minutes, and this happened. Sure enough, there was something wrong. Jinwon turned to open the window, but before she got halfway, her body softened and she fell on the sofa. She touched her forehead, and a wave of dizziness came over her. Her head was heavy, and her vision was a little blurred. Jinwon clenched her hands, digging her nails deep into her palms to keep herself awake. After experiencing so much, how could she not know this situation? Chapter 251. She was so dizzy that she tried to stand up several times but still fell onto the sofa. She struggled for a while and gave up. She pressed her eyebrows with one hand and picked up her cell phone to check the time with the other. She thought about it in a daze. Mo Jingshin must have heard what she said on the phone earlier, right? Her voice was very low, and he was in a meeting. Maybe he didn't hear it clearly. Jinwon bit her lip and kept awake. She didn't know how long it had been. 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 10 minutes. Just as Jinwon's consciousness was getting more and more muddled, suddenly, there was a loud bang from the door of the private room, which woke her up. Jinwon raised her eyes and saw Mo Jingshin coming in. The man looked stern. When he saw Jinwon lying on the sofa, his cold eyes swept around the private room and finally stopped on the teacup on the coffee table. The moment Jinwon saw Mo Jingshin's face, she released a sigh of relief. Feeling the man's approach, it was a familiar and reassuring scent. Her muddled mind instantly cleared up. The man's hand touched her face. After confirming that she was fine, he saw that she was slightly dazed and immediately stood up. Just a few minutes later, the people outside the private room, whom Jinwon had never seen before, all fell down in front of the door. Jinwon turned to see that Mo Jingshin had opened the window of the private room to let in the wind from outside. She breathed the fresh air outside the window and felt much better. She supported herself to sit up and suddenly heard a text message on her cell phone. Sure enough, there was signal coming in when the door and window were opened. But the text message said that Mo Jingshin had called her 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago, 3 minutes ago. In this short period of 10 minutes, Mo Jingshin's phone calls did not stop. Jinwon sobered up, saw the people outside the door, and heard Mo Jingshin's cold voice methodically. I'm not interested in who the person in charge of your club is, but I don't think your boss wants me to know who he is. Then the people who followed Mo Jingshin went to the bathroom on this floor to find a few rags and stuff the mouths of the people on the ground. At this time, Jinwon's cell phone rang again. When she picked it up, Ji Hongwon's voice was serious as usual. "Won, did you call me before?" From his tone, it was obvious that he didn't know what had happened in T-City. "Dad, are you in High City or T-City?" Jinwon asked. "How did you know I was in T-City?" "Recently, the company has a business partner from T-City. I came over to take a look, but I was in a hurry and didn't have time to visit you." "Who told you about this?" "Where are you now?" "I'm at the hotel arranged by my business partner. I can't find a time right now. My business partner's car is already waiting downstairs. If I can squeeze out some time before returning to High City, I'll go to T University to see you." "Dad, you go ahead with your work. I'm fine." "Are you sure?" "Girl, you rarely call me. My phone was in my pocket, and I didn't notice when I pressed the mute button. That's why I saw the missed call." "Yes, I'm fine." After speaking, without waiting for Ji Hongwon to ask again, Jinwon quickly hung up to prevent him from worrying. The reason why she believed Secretary Zhou's words was that she had texted Ji Hongwon's assistant when she was chatting with Xia Tian over the weekend. She had asked the assistant about Ji Hongwon's recent schedule, and the assistant had confirmed that he indeed had a schedule in T-City. She didn't expect that the person behind the scenes knew everything about the Ji family better than she did, and knew who Jinwon often interacted with and trusted. The Ji Corporation's network had always been simple, and Secretary Zhou's actions had always been reassuring. She suddenly felt a chill on her head. Stimulated by the chill, Jinwon instantly sobered up. She raised her head to see the man who was putting a towel wrapped in an ice pack on her head. She subconsciously raised her hand to hold the towel on her head. She had been sitting on the sofa since she received the call and didn't have the strength to get up. She didn't notice when the people who had been restrained in front of the door were taken out. She just looked at the handsome and cold face of the man in front of her. "Are you better?" Mo Jingshin moved his hand away from her head and watched her compress her head with an ice pack and a towel. Jinwon nodded. "Fortunately, I called you in advance. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened." At this time, there was a noise outside the door. It seemed that the person in charge of the club was called out by Mo Jingshin's men. Mo Jingshin looked at her for a while and touched her head. "It's all right. Leave when you're sober. We'll talk about it when we get back." Jinwan responded with an "in." Right now, although she did not have much strength in her body, the fresh air in the private room and the chill on her head allowed her to regain a clear mind. Jinwan briefly told him about the call she received from Secretary Zhou and what happened after she came here today. Mo Jingshin looked at her and said flatly, "Someone can bribe Secretary Zhou and trick you into coming here in the name of your father. Jimin Gran, Secretary Zhou, Shun Haru, or someone else. I'll find out who it is." "Who do you think it is?" The sound outside had gone far away. Jinwan couldn't hear how Mo Jingshin's men were going to deal with this club, but she didn't think they would let it go so easily. Mo Jingshin touched her cold forehead again to prevent her from harming her body. He took the towel and ice pack from her hands and threw them on the coffee table. The G family is only so big. If it's not the old, then it's the young. Who else could it be? Stay here. When you feel better, wait for me. I'm going to solve the problem of this club." With that, he asked her to sit down on the sofa, took off his suit jacket, and put on her. He patted her shoulder reassuringly, and then closed the door and went out. The men in black suits were Mo Jingshin's men. They had called up the list of all the private rooms booked here from the person in charge of the club. When they saw Mo Jingshin coming out, they handed the list to him. Not long after, the young girl hiding in a private room not far away was taken out. When she was dragged out, she was still cursing and struggling. When she turned to see the man who was unbuttoning his shirt and pacing towards her, her expression froze. Perhaps because she never wanted to do too much in front of Mo Jingshin, Jimin Gran didn't expect that Mo Jingshin would come in such a short time. The man's cold eyes fell on her face. He clearly didn't look surprised at Jimin Gran, who had just been caught. As soon as her eyes met Mo Jingshin's, Jimin Gran froze. Pressed by the men in black suits in the corridor, it took her more than 10 seconds to come to herself. "Brother Jingshin?" Jimin Gran's face turned pale. "Why are you here?" Chapter 252. Mo Jingshin stood there. He had given his suit jacket to Jinwan, and he only wore a black shirt inside. He stood calmly and indifferently. He only glanced at her coldly before turning to speak to his subordinates. He did not look at Jimin Gran again. "Call the mastermind behind you out." When Mo Jingshin finally looked at her, his tone was cold and indifferent. It was clear that he did not intend to say a single word to her. Jimin Gran was already used to his coldness and arrogance. Now that she was pressed down by his men and couldn't move, she was instantly angered. She glared at him. "What mastermind? I've been going against Jinwan for a long time. What mastermind could I have? Isn't the mastermind me? Isn't that how you guys usually look at me?" Jimin Ran's emotions were a little agitated. When she spoke, she was almost roaring. However, the man standing in front of her remained calm and indifferent without the slightest reaction. She instantly felt that she would forever be a dancing clown in front of him. Jimin Ran's embarrassment turned into anger. "I just can't stand Jinwan. I just don't like to see the two of you pretending to be happy together without any qualms. Since you've caught him, you can do whatever you want with him." She was relying on her identity as Jinwan's biological sister and the fact that Ji Hongwon and the Ji family were still around. Mo Jingshin would not lay a hand on her, let alone kill her. Mo Jingshin glanced at her indifferently. To be able to use you as a gun, how long has that person been unable to do anything to Jinwan? How could he let a smart woman like you stand out to make trouble? Mo Jingshin. Jimin Gran instantly felt as if she had been insulted and said angrily, "Do you know how much I like you? Is it wrong that I like you? But you've never been stingy enough to look at me. Since it was a marriage alliance, why did the Ji family and the Mo family choose Jinwan? Where am I lacking? I can't accept it. So, I wanted to use Jinwan's unwillingness to be with you as an excuse to find an opportunity to get close to you. The person who denied your marriage was Jinwan. Back then, the one who did not know how to cherish was also Jinwan. But you've been protecting her all along. Why? Why did you treat her so well from the moment you married her? Why can I only watch from afar? Where am I lacking?" Mo Jingshin's smile was cold and clear. You're far from it. You? Jimin Gran bit her lower lip angrily and glanced at the men around her. She opened her mouth and said to the man who was a few meters away from her, "Ha! Far from it? She's indeed far worse than me. If it was just a marriage between the G and Mo families, Jinwon wouldn't be worthy at all. She's not even my father's blood relative." All of a sudden, the door to the private room behind Mo Jingshin opened. Jinwon walked out and approached quickly. "Ha!" There was a loud slap. Even the men in black suits who were used to being calm all the time turned to look at her. Mo Jingshin's calm gaze landed on Jimungran's reddened face. His cold and indifferent gaze did not contain the slightest bit of warmth. Jimungran could not believe that she had actually been hit by Jinwon again. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Jimungran's nails, which she had just done half a month ago, dug into her palms. She glared at Jinwon. "Jinwon, the slap you gave me before, I'll definitely return it to you tenfold, 100-fold. Don't even think about having peace in this lifetime." When had she, Jimungran, ever been stepped on like this? Back then, at the G family, in front of her father, it was fine if Jinwon dared to hit her. But now, if she actually dared to hit her in front of Mo Jingshin. In the past, in front of Mo Jingshin, she would at most be ridiculed. Jimungran immediately exploded. Like a shrew, she struggled to break free from the men's hands and pounced toward Jinwon. Her stance was clearly even fiercer than when she was at the G family in High City. Just as Jimungran was struggling too hard and was screaming in pain from being held down by the men, a figure suddenly appeared by the elevator. Seeing the figure approaching, Jinwon instantly frowned. At the same time, Jimungran was pulled back by the person who approached and fell into the man's chest. However, the man did not gently press her down and did not allow her to struggle. At the same time, the man's sharp eyes swept the corridor and did not linger on Jinwon's face. In the end, because of Mo Jingshin's cold gaze, his eyes were stopped in the air. It was indeed Sheng Yihan. From the moment she saw the cup of tea on the coffee table, Jinwon had guessed it. Sheng Yihan had been a doctor for many years. He usually did not drink coffee or drinks with any flavorings. He preferred tea, especially the kind that was not strong and was very light. Meeting Mo Jingshin's gaze, Sheng Yihan's lips curved into a smile. He exerted more strength in his hands and restrained Jimungran, who was still desperately pouncing toward Jinwon. Jimungran felt pain. This man almost broke her ribs, but he did not allow her to touch Jinwon. The stinging pain was unbearable. Her eyes immediately turned red, and she screamed, "Brother Sheng, let go of me. It's not the first time that Jinwon has hit me. What right does she have? She's just a bastard who doesn't even know who her biological father is. Let go of." Jimungran's wrist was suddenly grabbed. The pain almost made her tears fall. Although Sheng Yihan's action was to hold Jimungran in his arms, anyone could see that Jimungran was really in pain from his grip. He was indifferent to Jimungran's cries and screams in his arms. Instead, he raised his eyelids to look at Mo Jingshin in the light of the corridor. This was a man who looked elegant and indifferent, but in fact almost broke the ribs of the woman in his arms. He looked noble, gentle, and meticulous. His handsome features did not reveal any violent emotions, but Jinwon felt a chill in her bones just by looking at him. It was just like when she was young. When she was young in the G family, he had a smile on his face, but he had forced her step by step. Facing Sheng Yihan's deliberate stare, Mo Jingshin glanced at him mildly and said unhurriedly, "The blade you chose isn't sharp enough. You can only blame yourself for having poor taste. Even if you want to break her on the spot, the result will be the same. It's fine if you spill blood in front of me, but in front of Jinwon, I advise you to restrain yourself. Don't scare my wife." Jimungran immediately looked at Sheng Yihan helplessly. That night, when she was thrown by Jinwon and Feng Ling in that haunted, abandoned area, it was Sheng Yihan's car that stopped in front of her. But now, what did his words mean? Dash. Chapter 253. Sheng Yihan smiled mockingly. So, Emo, his brows were tinged with mockery. I thought Jinwan still had that female bodyguard by her side. As he spoke, he released Ji Mengran's hand that was about to break her bones and let go of the person in his arms without pity. His hand dropped down. Emo Jingshen calmly glanced at him and then at Ji Mengran, whose face was pale from the pain and who appeared to be deep in thought due to the current situation. Ji Mengran shrunk her shoulders, speaking with some dissatisfaction. Brother Sheng, I know I was rash and didn't follow your original plan, but the matter between Jinwan and I really can't be resolved with just a few words. I originally wanted to use Dad's name to trick her over. I know you didn't expect her to actually come here. I didn't want to drag you down with me. But Sheng Yihan looked at her indifferently. What's the use of saying these to get me off the hook at this time? His voice was flat and emotionless. From the beginning, although Sheng Yihan had the intention to help her, he definitely didn't want to drug Jinwan or lure her here in such a simple way. Ji Mengran was indeed eager for quick success. Sheng Yihan was a very patient person, but Ji Mengran couldn't wait any longer. Jinwan drawled her tone lightly. So, I was called to this place in the middle of the night. Do you have other plans besides this sister who has always disliked me and wants to hurt me? Facing Jinwan's cold question, Sheng Yihan raised his eyelids, and his eyes were pale and transparent. He didn't answer Jinwan's words, but just looked expressionlessly at the elegant man standing under the light. On the night when Jinwan was at Shine's dinner party, Sheng Yihan had already met Emo Jingshen face to face. At that time, their cold eyes had already determined that today's ending would not be too peaceful. I don't have other plans. Between me and you, do I need to have a plan? Sheng Yihan asked with a faint smile. His expression was unfathomable and annoying. Ji Mengran was unwilling to be ignored. She suddenly turned sideways and looked arrogantly at Jinwan. You should have heard what I said just now. Jinwan, you are not the daughter of the Ji family at all. Mom only married Dad after she was pregnant with you. Even if the marriage between them is real, even if you have been wearing the hat of the eldest miss of the Ji family for many years, the blood flowing from your upper body is not the blood of our Ji family. You used to be as proud as you are now. Jinwan, for the sake of the fact that we've been sisters all these years, I don't care how many things you've taken from the Ji family that belong to me, but who do you think you are in the alliance between the Ji family and the Mo family? What right do you have to stand here and call yourself Mrs. Mo? Aren't you the one who should be ashamed of your inferiority? Although Ji Mengran's eyes were slightly red, her words were spoken with an extremely disdainful smile. She carried the bone-deep arrogance of the Ji family's true young lady as she coldly glanced at Jinwan. Mo Jingshen did not look at Ji Mengran, but brought Jinwan, whose expression was unclear, behind him. He then turned to Sheng Yihan and said mildly, "The secret that Ji Hongwen hid for so many years was easily discovered by you when you were in the Ji family. Now, this secret that can't be considered a secret can only be used by Ji Mengran as a trump card. The reason you prepared for a long time as bait failed to become Jinwan's bait and instead lured Ji Mengran." Sheng Yihan sneered, but his smile did not reach his eyes. Since it can't be considered a secret, how can it be considered as bait? Mo Jingshen looked at him for a while and then turned his head to look at Jinwan. After hearing Ji Mengran's words, Jinwan did not speak. Or rather, whether it was the rumor that she was an illegitimate daughter among the socialites in High City, or the fact that she grew up and gradually found that her facial features were not similar to anyone in the Ji family, she had long been aware of all this in her heart. Although she could not digest it now, at least she was not particularly shocked. Mo Jingshen was right. Ji Mengran was really stupid to think that this was a trump card against her. If Jinwan was still the Jinwan who relied on the Ji family in her previous life, she might find it hard to accept it. After all, the present was different from the past. No matter what the truth was, Jinwan did not rely on the Ji family at all. What she had was only gratitude to Ji Hongwen and the father-daughter relationship that she could not bear to part with. Looking at Ji Mengran's arrogant eyes again, Jin Wan's eyes filled with a faint, calm, and cold smile. Maybe it's because I've never deliberately held on to what you value, so your self-righteousness can only comfort you in your heart. What else can it do? Ji Mingran's eyes narrowed. She took the opportunity to raise her voice to ask, in that case, you've never deliberately held on to your marriage with Mo Jingshin? Jin Wan glanced at her, her gaze clear. It's precisely because this marriage is the only thing I've ever held on to, and the only thing I've ever fought for is the man you've always wanted but couldn't get, that you hate me to this extent. You've disregarded our 20-year sisterhood, plotted against me, and even tried to kill me several times? You don't even know who your biological father is. Who gave you the confidence to stand here and say? Ji Mingran was about to retort, but Mo Jingshin had already held Jin Wan's hand. Without looking at anyone in the corridor, he walked toward the private room behind him. The private room door opened and closed, and Jin Wan was forced to enter. She raised her eyes to see the man's thin lips pursed into a straight line. He softly called out to her in Wan. Jin Wan's heart, which had been wavering and unable to calm down, immediately calmed down. She opened her mouth, her voice cool and calm. My ability to withstand blows is better than you think. I'm fine. It's just that some things need time to digest. Mo Jingshin stared at her. Don't listen to anyone's nonsense about your birth. Find a chance to have a good talk with your father. The truth will never be as simple as what others say. Jin Wan nodded. He raised his hand to touch her hair, gentle and indifferent. You were drugged earlier. It's not suitable for you to speak too much with them. We'll talk about this when we get back. Jin Wan nodded again. She was not at a loss, but at such a time, she still listened to Mo Jingshin's arrangements. After all, he was considerate of her emotions. Coincidentally, she did not wish to be at daggers drawn with Ji Mingran. Although she did not feel much, her body was still weak. She allowed him to hold her, but did not let her go out. Chapter 254. After that, Ji-won didn't know what happened outside. More than 10 minutes later, Mo Jingshin came back and took her away. Most of the people in the corridor had left. Jin-won was wearing Mo Jingshin's suit. She heard the man whisper in her ear, "Don't say anything. Just go." However, for some reason, although Ji Mingran stood there biting her lips and did not speak, it was clear from her eyes that she hated Jin-won to the extreme. In the end, in front of Mo Jingshin, she didn't dare to act rashly. At this moment, she was like a clown, gritting her teeth and glaring at Mo Jingshin. Jin-won brushed past her. The two women seemed to be calm, but the scene was like an oppressive tsunami. As soon as she walked past Ji Mingran, Jin-won suddenly stopped and looked at her flatly. "So, Mingran, we don't even have a biological sister relationship anymore, do we?" Even if what she said was true, that her mother married into the family after she was pregnant with Jin-won. So her biological father was not Ji Hongwon, even if they had the same mother but different father and were related by blood, even that had been cut in half. When Jin-won said this, there was no expression on her face, but her dark eyes made people dare not look at her, especially those who were guilty. "When did you treat me as your biological sister?" Ji Mingran was very guilty, but she still straightened her back. Seeing Jin-won didn't speak, Ji Mingran was about to speak, but suddenly Sheng Yi-han gave her a lukewarm look, and she immediately bit her lip. Jin-won curved her lips, smiling expressionlessly. "Indeed, you've never treated me as your biological sister. In this world, even the closest people can be separated just like that. Even blood relations can be changed just like that. Then, from now on, Mingran, I won't be polite anymore." You. Not understanding what Jin-won meant by her casual words, she was worried that Sheng Yi-han would really be angry and refuse to help her after returning to High City, so she didn't dare to go too far in front of him. Ji Mingran stared at Jin-won's back. It was a very light and calm sentence, but made her feel an inexplicable chill in her heart. Mo Jingshin looked at Jin-won through the light in the corridor. As she walked out, she seemed to let go of something she had been hesitating to grasp. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly to the people behind him, "Send second Miss G to Chairman G. As outsiders, the Sheng family shouldn't interfere in this kind of family trifles." Mo Jingshan's gaze only lightly swept over Sheng Yihan's smiling face. The corridor was quiet. "No, I'm not going, Dad. I'm going with Brother Sheng. Shut up," Mo Jingshan said in a low and heavy voice. His cold eyes swept by silently and intimidatingly. Ji Mengran's shoulders shrank. Mo Jingshan's cell phone vibrated. He took it out, took a look at it expressionlessly, and then quickly answered, "What's the matter?" She didn't know what the other end said, but his voice was still flat and emotionless. "I see." After a simple conversation, he hung up the phone. Jinwan had been waiting in the car outside the club. Mo Jingshan opened the car door, only to see the little woman wrapped in his suit sitting in the front passenger seat. Her eyes were fixed on her cell phone, but her fingers were sliding back and forth on the screen of the cell phone. She didn't look at anything seriously. "Do you need me to accompany you to see Chairman G?" Mo Jingshan stared at her face and said flatly, "Only he can give you the most accurate answer to the questions in your heart. Forget it. My father came here because of the invitation of a business partner. If he can spare time, he'll come to see me. He doesn't want to talk about these old things, and I won't force him to talk about them. But no matter what, his feelings for me over these years are real. So what if we are blood relatives? After all, he treats me as his own daughter. If I ask him now, it will only hurt his heart." Jinwan put down the cell phone and did not really call Ji Hongwen. Mo Jingshan's hand fell on her head. "It's good that you're open-minded. These things won't affect your future life. Don't think too much. The truth will come to the surface. I'm here for everything." "And?" Jinwan suddenly glanced at him. "Then is the person you want to marry the Ji family's daughter, or it's you?" Mo Jingshan interrupted her. "It has nothing to do with your surname." Although she knew he would say this, perhaps women were like this. They would only feel happy when he said it. Therefore, Jinwan immediately grinned, satisfied like a child. On the way back, Jinwan looked at the neon lights passing by outside the car and said, "I was wondering how Ji Mingran could have bribed Secretary Zhou. Even if she could get in touch with Secretary Zhou, she couldn't have bribed this powerful club in T-City. She couldn't have extended her influence to such a big club in T-City. Now it seems that I was right." When Sheng Yihan left the Ji family, he had already set his eyes on the Ji family. When he returned to the Sheng family, the first thing he wanted to do was to swallow the Ji family. Now Ji Mingran must have been seriously brainwashed by him. Even if she was sold by him, she would still happily count the money for him. "It's not you who will be sold. The current situation of the Ji family has nothing to do with you." Hearing the man's words, Jinwan subconsciously turned to look at him. Mo Jingshan stared ahead and drove carefully. Because of her gaze, he held the steering wheel with one hand and put down the other to hold her hand. "Don't you want to see the Ji family being swallowed by the Sheng family? I don't care about others, but my father has never owed me anything. Since I was a child, although he is a strict father, he has always been a good father." Jinwan didn't say more, but in her heart, she still insisted on the original idea. No matter what happened to the Ji family, she couldn't watch Ji Hongwen get into trouble again. Even if he was not her biological son, the relationship between father and daughter didn't necessarily have to be related by blood. Ji Hongwen was a good father, and that was enough. Besides, there were still a lot of things to ask, so she couldn't make a conclusion so easily. The car stopped at a traffic light intersection. Mo Jingshan took a look at her and said calmly, "All right." Although it was a very simple word, Jinwan instantly felt as if she had taken a dose of tranquilizer. No matter how powerful the Sheng family was now, if Mo Jingshan didn't allow anything to happen to the Ji family, even Tianxing families might not be able to swallow the Ji family. Until the car stopped at the gate of a hospital in T-City. "Get out of the car." Jinwan was almost asleep in the car. Hearing the man's voice, she raised her eyes and looked out. "Why did you bring me to the hospital?" The man unfastened his seatbelt and casually answered her question. "The pregnancy test you gave last time has expired. Don't you know it?" Jean immediately sobered up. She sat up straight and looked at the hospital by the roadside in surprise. Has it expired? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.